or something.
Yeah, I gotta give it to the UK though, right? For population, right? I mean, if it against the population, they do very well since the Olympics that they held here in the UK. They've made a lot of efforts.
Yeah, if you divide,
Um,
yeah, that's a good point. The number of medals divided by population.
Yep. So UK, they call it the Great Britain. Total 16 medals. So 5 gold, 6 silver, and 5 bronze. Not
I
too
still
bad.
say they have to add software programming to the Olympics. That's the only way India is going to get a whole bunch of medals.
Cyber hacking, cyber hacking.
Okay.
No, that's the Russians.
Oh yeah.
what about
Sorry.
cricket?
Yes, cricket. Maybe next time.
The cricket's actually being talked about as an Olympic sport anyway.
Yep. Maybe soon.
So India does have a chance.
I wonder, that's kind of an interesting one because I would love to see a map of where cricket is played on the planet. Same reason why baseball is not in the Olympics, because it's just only.
It's basically England and the old colonies. England
Yeah.
and the colonies.
Yep.
Hey,
Old
baseball is in the
colonies.
Olympics.
Baseball is in the Olympics?
They put it back
this
in.
year. This year it is, yes.
Praise be to him.
Wild. Okay.
Skateboarding's in the Olympics.
Yeah, we got skate now. And Japan won it, basically, the skateboarding.
Yeah,
A 13-year-old.
13-year-old girl won the gold.
And
ladies.
the boy as well was Japanese, I think, for the gold.
Yeah, Japanese too, pretty young as well. And they have surfing this year too. At Enoshima, your favorite place.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, so who won surfing though?
The U.S., I think.
Yes,
last
US
night,
for
US
the
The
girls.
won.
And
male
women.
was Brazil. Male
I was
was
about to
Brazil
Brazil.
say.
for
I was
Yeah,
about
Brazil
to
for
say.
And
male.
female was
Yeah.
Hawaiian.
Woohoo! Hawaiian.
yeah.
I was about to say Brazil could win for men surfing, easy. So, okay. Well, there's your.
Well, quickly on India's medal, I think hockey is field hockey. I think India would win a silver there because it's the second best team next to Australia. And they lost to 1-7, but I think on the day they performed really good. Weightlifting and boxing, they have been getting medals for it. So I think we are looking at at least two.
Yeah, I think so far, Indian lady wants silver for the weightlifting. That's all for the medal so far. We'll see.
Okay. Here we go. Are we ready? I think we're ready. Okay.
Yes, let's do this.
Let's do it. Okay.
4 minutes late. Sorry.
No, we started on time. It's just we started with Olympic news updates from Cheryl. So there you go. There's your Olympic news updates. And here is your top biggest headlines at this very moment. Happy Wednesday, everybody. And the top headline at this very moment is that Apple reported their Q3 revenue up 36% from last year overall on the revenue side. And then income income went from 21 billion from 11 billion a year ago, so about 100% increase on net income. And then services, which is non-hardware stuff, went up 17 billion, up from 13 billion, so about a 50% up on that. And then iPhone sales of about 40 billion. So not a bad quarter after all. And there's kind of sub headlines, which is that Apple's quarterly revenue for wearables, home, and accessories category, which includes watch and AirPods, was nearly 9 billion just in the AirPods and watch alone, just in accessories. Holy cow. Nearly 9 billion in accessories, which is up 36%. And nearly 75% of watch buyers were new. So as I said, the Apple Watch is currently, and to some degree the AirPods, are the Trojan horse that gets people into the Apple ecosystem, and they know it, and their competitors know it, and Google Android knows it, and Google loses market share to Apple because of it. And that's why they need to, even though they don't even care about the Android Watch anymore, they have to do it to stop people from buying the Apple Watch. So it is what it is. And then Apple's greater China sales were up 58% over the year. And so they continue to grow internationally into other markets where they're not completely saturated yet, like in the US. And Mac and iPad sales break quarterly records. Apple warns that supply constraints due to legacy chips production will be worse next quarter than this quarter and will likely affect sales of the iPhone and iPad next quarter. And that's because they say legacy chips because that means they're the old chips, that they used to use from TSMC and others. Now they're trying to in-house everything and make their own chips to become less dependent, on other countries, other suppliers, what have you, all in. And the chips that they have been making, these M1 chips, holy cow, it's just really blowing everybody away how tremendously powerful all the new devices that they're making with these M1 chips. And then Microsoft did its quarterly report, but we don't really care much about that. Their main focus now is on cloud growth, which is what they call Microsoft Azure. They have LinkedIn, which did quite well. And then that's what they need to focus on is the cloud, where they can still grow a lot. And acquiring
LinkedIn's a $10 billion company. It's amazing.
Yeah. So passing a $10 billion mark in annual revenue. And they need to continue to buy things like LinkedIn, like fast-growing but mature startups that can bring significant additional revenue. And that's how big companies can continue to grow, which is by acquiring faster-growing, smaller companies like that. And Facebook, the next biggest story, well, we'll skip the third biggest story to go to the fourth biggest story, which is that Google reports that they're up 62% year over year on income and 31% on cloud. And YouTube, as part of Google, reported $7 billion in revenue, which is all ad revenue, because that's how they make money, which is up 84% from last year. Holy cow. And says that their new YouTube Shorts feature now has 15 billion global daily views, up about 250% in the past few months since March. And that,
Tyler, YouTube TV is a subscription service. I don't know what that constitutes of their revenues, but we discussed it at the earlier call. But the people who get YouTube television pay for that.
Yeah, now they call it YouTube Premium here in Asia, anyways, where it's about $3 a month to get rid of all the ads and the ability to download everything. And it includes YouTube Music, which is kind of their competitor to Spotify because they basically have all of the songs in YouTube, and you can build playlists. And it's kind of like YouTube, but without the video. It's just the audio, and you do it for music and everything. So you get all of that for $3 a month, and it's a pretty sweet deal. Especially if you watch then they even tell you how many minutes you saved at the end of the month or the year, and it's a shoot ton of minutes that you saved.
I mean, like a competitor for like Sling or something, you know what I'm saying? So it gets you like a TV channel. So I'm not sure if there may not be something similar overseas,
And then we skipped over the third biggest article, which is that Facebook will restrict how advertisers can target users under 18 years of old across all of their big apps, Facebook app, Instagram, and their Messenger app, and I believe even WhatsApp, because they don't want to get in hot water over that. And I think they probably know that the U.S. is about to crack down on that for everybody, not just Facebook. So with this new policy of how advertisers can deal with minors under 18 years of old, what Facebook is doing is you can only target people based on age and gender and location. You can no longer target on interest, because young people are, there was an example given in the article about how kids were seeing ads for gambling and smoking and alcohol and all kinds of things because of some website they went to or whatever. And they're not really in control or don't have adult-like abilities to manage, what they're exposed to and whatnot. So I think that's very laudable of them to kind of cut that out. But on the other hand, they are also going to move forward. Same day, same company made two announcements that they're going to cut out advertising for minors based on their interests, but across all their apps. But they are going to move forward with a new Instagram for kids, targeting 13 and younger, and which really gets them on board very early. But there's a third headline, which is that accounts under 16 will be private by default. So you, in creating your account, you won't be public, or I imagine, I wonder if you will be able to choose to be public, but certainly by default it will be private. So the FTC, by the way, the Federal Trade Commission, warns of seizing companies who have algorithms and seizing the algorithms that are juiced by ill-gotten data. Juiced up algorithms juiced by ill-gotten data, as if data could juice something, as if data is juicy. So I loved that the FTC is acknowledging that data is indeed juicy. And something, a bit of an inside joke here. Those who join us every day know what we're talking about. But indeed, data is very sweet and very juicy. And the FTC says they are going to, they're warning about seizing algorithms that were juiced by ill-gotten data. So maybe that's why Facebook saw that, took note of that, and quickly updated, that they won't be collecting as much data, or maybe they are collecting, but they're certainly not allowing people to target teens or anyone under 18 based on data, with the exception of gender, age, and location. So the next biggest headline is that Activision Blizzard is in this ongoing daily battle that started off with them an announcement that they were going to be sued in a big lawsuit. A lot of their female team members were claiming that they are being sexually harassed and sexually discriminated against. And then a day or so later, that was about a week ago, and then a couple days later, we got a headline that the CEO and another senior executive made comments internally in internal emails that this is not entirely accurate and casts a bad light on the company, and et cetera, et cetera. And then,
Tyler, it wasn't the CEO, because it wasn't Bobby Kotick. I think it was the guy under him who made those comments.
There was two people, I recall.
Really?
Check. Yeah. So let's check.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't Bobby Kotick, and he's the CEO.
I believe it was. Let's check it out.
Really?
Yeah. Hold on. So Blizzard CEO. Let's look up Blizzard CEO. And because he even apologized is the other part of the headline.
He was CEO of the subsidiary. Okay, I'm thinking of Bobby Kotick, who's the CEO of the parent company.
Okay. So the headline that we read it was about 4 days ago. Activision Blizzard CEO calls company response to the suit was tone deaf, and he says he failed women at the studio. Ex-CEO Mike Morhaime told the women of Blizzard, "I am so sorry to have let you down." These are the recent headlines in the past few hours, so it's not easy to find them from a few days ago. Let me see here. Yeah, but I recall it named two people, and I recall one of them was the CEO, that he said something that people didn't like, and that led 48 hours ago a signature collection of 1,600 current and former employees to express that they were very upset with how, what I recall, it was the CEO's response to saying that.
No. It was like it had some executive title, but I don't think it was Kotick. But I'll find it for you.
Okay.
Because there is new stuff. I actually tried to tweet that article this morning. For some reason, didn't tweet. I think that number of people who signed that letter, apparently according to the Wall Street Journal today, is now up to 3,000, because I think it's digital, so I think people can add to it.
Yep.
But they hired an outside law firm, so this is new. They've hired Wilmer Hale, which is a really major law firm that also handled the investigations in for Enron and WorldCom, the internal investigations. But there's something else that's interesting in that article, where they made a comment today that they're going to remove. This is more tech related. They're going to remove content from their games that they think is inappropriate or something. So now it's impacting what they're going to the product apparently. I mean, I guess if there's something that they think is derogatory towards women or something, they're going to remove it.
But this is a powerful, like what the original one where they had 1,000. Thanks for the update, Ken. Because when I saw that article and I put it out there, it was 1,000 employees out of 10,000, right? And I thought that struck me as a large proportion. Just
it's now 2,000.
And now you're saying it's 3,000. Wow.
Yeah, the one I'm reading. It could be 3,000 now. I just read one that said 2,000, and let's see who's got the most recent headline on them. But now the latest news, and this is the big headline for today, is that the Blizzard is encouraging its own employees to attend Wednesday. Well, the employees announced when we met recently, 7 hours ago, the employees were saying the ones who signed the letter are going to have a walkout tomorrow, which starts now, Wednesday morning. It's now, what time is it there in Pacific time? What time?
7 a.m. Like 7:17.
Right. So apparently they're not going to show up for work in about an hour. And that's what they're saying is we're going to have a walkout on Wednesday. The people who signed that, which could be, like he's saying, Ken's saying it might be 3,000.
A third of the employees. Right.
Right. Well, you might get other people who walk out who didn't sign it, but maybe not. But something in that ballpark. And then again, that also includes former employees. So they're obviously not going to walk out. There's nothing to walk out on. So it'll be interesting to see how many people walk out. But now the latest headline is Blizzard is encouraging its own employees to attend Wednesday's walkout. We'll say what? Blizzard leadership emailed employees to say there will be no repercussions. Everybody walk out. That's what they're saying. On Wednesday, Activision Blizzard employees will walk out of work to protest the company's response to a giant sexual harassment and workplace discrimination lawsuit filed by the state of California. Now Blizzard, the studio at the center of many of those public allegations, is giving the protest its blessing. Blizzard leadership emailed studio employers today to let them know they won't face repercussions for attending, and in fact, they can have paid time off for the walkout. You get paid today, even if you walk out. The Verge obtained a copy of the email, which we aren't sharing here to avoid potentially identifying sources. After over 20% of Google employees walked out of work in 2018 to protest the company's mishandling of sexual harassment revelations, among other grievances. Several Google walkout organizers said they faced retaliation despite the company's supposed support of their cause. They left or got pushed out of the company. The National Labor Retaliation Board found earlier this year that Google arguably violated labor law by firing several other organizers as well. Over 2,600 Activision Blizzard employees have signed on a letter condemning the company's response to the state of California lawsuit. That's nearly a third of the company, assuming it hasn't grown or shrunken significantly since the official tally of 9,500 employees in December 2020. So there you go. You feel free to walk out. We won't retaliate, and you even get paid.
Why does this seem like a trap where it's like, yeah, go ahead, go to the fantasy baseball draft instead of going with me to
shopping? You know, it's like the classic. I think the classic domestic partnership. Sure, you can go out with your friends. Sure.
Yeah, I think partially this is it's a sign of how difficult the job market is right now in terms of recruiting high quality talent. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine that level of turnover and what it would cost them? So giving them a day off or giving them a walk off is totally within bounds because, right now, at least from our own internal experience, we're spending a lot of money on recruiting right now. And I can tell you that I'm not surprised, especially that level of talent is really hard to recruit and retain. So if that's all they have to do, I guess that's not that bad.
Yep. So it's a fair point. Like it gets really sticky when it gets to 30% of your company. That's a significant percentage. So interesting developments still happening, and they're scheduled to arrive at work, in about an hour. And we have in my DMs somebody who used to work there. So he obviously has a lot of friends who still work there and is going to give us an update later in the program about what's happening at work today, which is great. And the next big headline is that Google announces a new bug bounty program called Bug Bounty Hunter University. Bug Hunter University. BHU. Did you go to BHU? Oh, you did? What did you study? Well, and says the existing program found 11,000 bugs from 2,000 researchers, paying out over $30 million. The platform includes a new Bug Hunter University. Google announced a new bug bounty platform. And so if you find a vulnerability in any Google product, as 11,000 or 2,000 people did, and they found a collective 11,000 bugs and earned $30 million in the process, and now they're, that those platforms work. That's an 11,000 vulnerabilities that 30 million is a small price to pay for 11,000 vulnerabilities, because any one of those could have totaled way more than $30 million. So the math is incredibly simple on that. Those programs are brilliant, and companies absolutely should have bug bounty programs and pay cybersecurity folks for their time to help find vulnerabilities. And there's independent platforms that work for really small companies who can't do, the marketing that Google can do, like they just did in this headline. And that's things like HackerOne, where, there's basically any company can put their bug bounty programs up there. And even Google could co-list all of their offerings of bug bounty rewards on HackerOne as well, just to get additional distribution to all of the hackers who make an earning off of finding vulnerabilities and some of them in their spare time, some of them full time. The next big headline at this very moment is the Spotify Q2 revenue, which was up 23% year over year, as ad revenue jumped 110% year over year. Paying subscribers reached 165 million paying subscribers, up 20% year over year. They're now at total monthly active users. So their active users are 635 million, which is, by comparison, Twitter's about 250 million. So they've got more than Spotify is considerably bigger than Twitter, and they almost have as many paying subscribers as Twitter users, believe it or not. That's really impressive. Although they have a lot of fees as well, because they have to pay for all of their content, which is the music, where Twitter does not. You're providing that for free. So, but my goodness, do I believe Spotify has an incredibly huge opportunity financially looking forward with, letting artists become e-commerce, influencers to sell all kinds of stuff from their profiles to all of their fans and everything. It's tremendous. And arguably, Spotify is one of the few platforms that have the most creators. Well, notable creators. YouTube has a lot of creators. They don't have the really notable creators necessarily in the same way that Spotify does. So I think Spotify is in a really unique position in this creator economy, because they have so many creators. They have all of the music creators, all of, any musician you can think of is on the platform. So that could be huge potential to e-commerceify those creators, unlike TikTok, where you would struggle to name 100 creators on TikTok, or 100 creators on Snapchat, or 100 on Instagram. We could all name 100 creators, household names creators on Spotify. You see my point. So this whole creator economy thing, I think, is playing really perfectly into Spotify looking into the next few quarters.
Hey, Tyler, I think I found the clarification on the Activision thing. Yeah. So basically, when the lawsuit was filed, one of the things that was mentioned that I think he's the former president, actually, but I think it's confusing me. Alan Brock was personally aware of a lot of these allegations, and specifically against about one executive, and so I think sometimes the newspaper articles have got that confused, but I think it's relating to the fact that he's specifically mentioned in the suit as being, as kind of ignoring all of this. And then the other executive was the head of HR, Fran Towns. I think her name is Fran Townsend. I think she was like Bush's Homeland Security person at one point. She said initially she said the allegations are untrue and something else, so she was like denying them. And now basically I think what's going on today is that they're kind of admitting they have a problem.
Well, we'll find out how big that problem is when people are scheduled to show up for work in about 45 minutes. But no doubt there will be videos. And they might. I wonder if, in addition to walking out, they're going to stand outside and I suspect that they will, because they were clever enough to respond to the CEO. So when the sequence of events is quite interesting in this case, and boy, are they getting a lot of mileage in the press around this, because even when Google had this issue, it didn't cause this much press. So, or yeah, Uber did, but for different reasons. So in this case, there's a lawsuit in California. Some couple of very senior people in the C-suite or whatever make comments that, this is not good and we don't like this and this is a bad look. And they, rather than just say nothing, the employees decided to make a signature collection to demonstrate in concrete terms that they're upset with this response from the company about the lawsuit. And that signature collection is up to 2,500-ish employees, approximately. And that got its own headline. So, and it got a headline from quite a few publications, which means those employees who collected those signatures, or whoever the employee was who decided, you know what, we're going to find out how many of us don't like the response from the CEO and quantify it by doing a signature collection drive. And they did. And then they were obviously informed journalists. So somebody in the PR team, or comms team, as it's called, the communications team at Blizzard, is clearly helping steer the ship on this lawsuit, because they contacted all the press and said, hey, just an update on what's going on. We've done a signature collection and there's 2,500 team members, which is about 25% of our team members have said we don't agree with the CEO's statements that this is not, that this is inaccurate. And then they said, oh, by the way, we're going to have a walkout on Wednesday. And the company says, no problem, go ahead and do a walkout and we'll even pay you for it. And anyone can participate and we won't retaliate. And I think that was a genius PR move, actually, on the leadership's part to say that. So clever folks on both sides of this situation, and the art of war, so to speak, the art of PR, because now that it's become followed by journalists, the both sides are very making each move with a lot of thought in mind. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, I say all that because, given how much strategy is being employed in this from both sides and using the media, I bet rather than just stay home, they're going to show up to the office with signs and invite the press to see the 2,500 people who walked out, because that will, again, bring more pressure on the company to potentially even make a settlement before it even gets to court. So who knows how this could be really interesting. But very clever strategies being employed by the team members who brought the suit, and I have to say I kind of like the cut of the jib of the company to make it a paid day off for people who want to participate, and to even almost slightly encourage people to participate from the tone of it. So interesting development. So next big headline. We're about halfway through the big headlines, and then we're going to get into the fun, juicy, interesting, exciting, wild headlines that we all found around the web, because these ones are just the ones that everyone's sharing. Your cousins and coworkers who are not legitimate geeks most of the time, but this is what everybody's talking about with regard to tech headlines. The other next big one is that in the new iPad OS 15 beta, Apple makes a controversial new Safari redesign in the browser, which some people love, some people hate. And those usually are the best designs, are designs that are met with strong feelings on both sides, because that means you're trying new stuff. And you have to test that stuff very carefully and make sure you side with the right group, either the side that hates it or loves it. But they're giving people the option for now. And then based on how people respond to it, they might kind of force one way or the other, either rewind it or accelerate it and push everybody over to it. That happened in Apple very notably when they updated all of the icons to be much more cartoon-like as they are now on iOS. When you look at your phone home screen with all the icons, they all look very illustrated, where in the older version of the user interface, they were very photorealistic versions of the notepad and the email. You might remember that.
Skeuomorphic, right?
Yes.
Is what they used to call it.
Right. So when they updated to these very illustrated, colorful, childlike icons, people went berserk. I don't know if you remember this. Well, there was an incredibly strong backlash to that, which they knew they were right because they'd already done the A/B testing, and they knew that people, once you sit with it for a month, you're going to like it. And that happens all the time. And that's one of the hardest parts about designing products on the web, is that, you build stuff that is better for the customer than they know for themselves. And the customers stomp their feet and, yell and shout, we don't like this. And Apple has a long history of doing exactly that. Removing the CD drive out of the laptop, and people went bananas. And then who wants a laptop with a CD drive now? Anybody? So
literally, I just want one to rip all my old CDs so that I can get it into iTunes.
So the next big headline is that Algolia, which provides APIs for developers to integrate real-time search into websites and apps, their startup just raised $150 million to provide APIs to developers to integrate real-time search into websites. So you can have a little Google search bar on your own website, whatever it might be, and your app. Because apps are not good at searching within their own apps very often. And you can see, Clubhouse does quite a good job, honestly, relative to their age. Their search is actually quite good, but there's a lot of apps that aren't. And it's because they don't code it themselves. You have to use APIs that are better at finding the content. And, building apps is very modular, like Lego blocks, as we've explained in the past. And so now Algolia, Google doesn't really allow you to use Google search inside of your app. And a lot of apps wouldn't want to use Google inside of their apps because it would give Google too much of a view inside of their inner workings of their apps. So this company Algolia is doing that. And they just made a bunch of money to make search available inside of apps and websites. And the next headline is called Contentful, which offers APIs to developers to let companies manage content, raises $175 million, led by Tiger Global, no surprise. And again, you notice this is another startup raising a whole bunch of money for APIs. And this helps you understand just how powerful this whole API process is, where as a developer, when you're building a web product, you don't code everything. You tap into other people who have done code, like Stripe is my favorite example. If you decided you want to allow payments inside of your app, as Clubhouse itself did. Clubhouse wanted to allow people to send tips to each other. Well, guess what? That would take a huge, awesome team a long time to do correctly, and it would still have tons of bugs and still be hackable, and the money would get stolen and all of that. So what's the solution is a company made it super simple and super fast to implement. It's called Stripe. So you just add in a little line of code into your website, bada boom, bada bing, you've got payments, and they're super secure. And that was super fast. And you just saved yourself, a year or two of building a team and writing the code and testing the code and blah, 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 blah. And now you understand why Stripe is the biggest fintech company on the planet, because they make a little Lego brick that you can build into your little Lego castle of a product and your castle now has an economy of payments. And that's the nature of web these days. And the way that these products, this modularization of product building is done through APIs. And that's why,
Tyler, there's a fintech company in India. So they sell API to their competitors. So and what happened is that as a result of it, the expansion of their model, their product, their business model across. So they expanded to a couple of states in, let's say, 3-4 years. The moment they opened their APIs to their competitor, they are now all over India. So it's basically sharing and collaborating their APIs help them grow quite a lot.
Yes, and people are learning that the Swedish lesson that it's better to cooperate with everybody and just charge them a little bit than to fight everybody. And the historic, well, let's not bring the Nazis into this, shall we? No, let's not use that example. So the next article is
Michael, you're back. Just Michael, welcome back.
Oh, yep.
Michael.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, there he is. Who's that handsome devil down there?
How you doing, man? Are you there?
He's got to get that mic on.
Yeah, I hope he's better.
Yeah,
he's better.
He sounded good last time. So, looking forward to that laugh, Michael. Keep the mic open. And Biden instructs federal agencies to develop voluntary cybersecurity goals for companies operating critical infrastructure as officials consider mandatory rules. And so God bless them. And Justin, if you're with us, did Justin jump out? He did. Damn it. So, but I love that Biden is taking cybersecurity with the seriousness it deserves. And there's a lot to be done. And this is the kind of headlines I like to see. It says Biden directs agencies to develop cybersecurity standards for critical infrastructure. Though voluntary, officials said the new step could be a prelude to a push for cybersecurity mandates. And his quote is, "If we end up in war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence," Biden said yesterday. And that is an incredibly stern warning to two very specific countries. And they know who they are, and I think you do too. So we'll just leave them unnamed. And wow, those are strong words. So, yeah.
Escalation quickly there.
Huh? That escalated rather quickly. But he's actually probably right. And it's a fair warning, I would say. So anyway, a lot to be done still in the cybersecurity front, and good to hear they're continuing to pay attention to that very critical problem, because that also highlights how big the problem is, that it could lead to war. So that's not a trivial issue at all. So
Tyler, there are companies who does like VAPT testing. They many times overblow the problem as well. These cyber attacks generally do not happen with couple of just vulnerabilities or configuration problem. The attack actually happen through that kill chain, and there are a lot of kill chain and exploits available over internet. So what happens is that you can never catch up with these. So as long as these exploits are available and there are dedicated employees there, they can actually they can quickly safeguard their system against that. A lot of things is available over internet. It's just that to form that kill chain, there has to be a sequence of vulnerabilities and configuration which has to go wrong in a system. But the VAPT testing, these companies, they generally sell you that, okay, even if there are a couple of vulnerabilities, or you're all open for exploit. But it doesn't happen that way as well. So just want to share this perspective that they sometimes also oversell.
Okay, thanks for that. And then the next big headline is that PowerSchool, which develops software used by 70% of elementary and high school students in the U.S. and Canada, raises $711 million in its IPO, selling shares at $18, valuing it at $3.5 billion. I have never heard of PowerSchool, and that's amazing. It's being used by 70% of students, pre-college students in the U.S. and Canada. That's a whole lot of students.
Is that like a backend that they have maybe on like the IT side or something like that?
Yeah, it must be.
So,
It's not a consumer brand, yeah?
There's actually a whole
don't
microcosm of edutech software that sole job is just to connect these aged databases together in the backend so the teachers don't have to manually import spreadsheets of students from one profile to the next. It's probably one of those.
I may or may not be a
acquired-
helicopter auntie, and I vaguely remember it as being a communication tool between teachers and parents and aunties, and
There you go.
but I'm sure that it has more functionality. So it's kind of the equivalent of like when the principal or the teacher would call and say that your child did this, or your child has this, or this assignment is due. So I think that it's a communication platform, if I recall.
Okay, thanks. And then
Yeah, so,
Donish, hold on. Let's not. Donish has been trying for now 4 people to try and squeeze a word in here. Go ahead.
Well, my company was acquired by PowerSchool.
Oh, there you go.
I wanted to, yeah. So, so I started a company called School. I was like, "What's going on?" Started Schoology. Schoology was acquired by PowerSchool in 2019. You're absolutely right, Lakeisha. It's a social network powered by a learning management system. So this was a company that I started out of college, and so essentially it was, how can the world learn together? And the idea is, a lot of people, including Schoology and PowerSchool, recognized early on that kids love social media. And so what if we use that for education? And that was the whole premise behind it, which is, people sharing notes, people being able to communicate with each other. PowerSchool essentially owns the market after they acquired Schoology in 2019.
Thank you for that. So next big headline is Shopify beats their second quarter expectations with just over $1 billion in revenue, up 57% year over year, and surpassing $1 billion revenue for the first time. Gross merchandise volume was 40% year over year. Company expects 2021 adjusted earnings to top 2020 results. Revenue surpasses $1 billion, blah, 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 blah. In full transparency, I'm a very proud shareholder of Shopify and Spotify and a lot of the companies we read earlier. But boy, is Shopify kicking some ass lately. And they come up quite a bit in the background of some of the headlines we read. And like Spotify, I think they have a tremendously bright future ahead as they are enabling this whole new, one of the key players enabling the creator economy. And
hey, Tyler,
yes,
just a real quick one. Has Shopify become a bank yet?
Great question. I don't know.
They are doing some loan. So if you are a small company and then you want a loan with them, you can have access to small loan, like you want 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and then they will repay them with your sales, a percentage of your sales that you do.
Who asked that question?
I think Chris asked that question, but I think Chris
did, yeah.
really asking if you're really asking if they became like a regulated bank, not
right.
if they're just
did they get their proper bank papers?
Yeah,
like Klarna
did.
That
because with Tidal and Square,
right?
Square becoming a bank buying Tidal,
right?
Maybe it's just like the premonition, or just
right.
Somehow I'm tied into tech news of 2 weeks from now, but I already thought that Shopify and Spotify were hooked up, and that somehow Shopify was already the bank, and that led to.
They don't have the license yet.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
How do you know that, Cheryl?
I'm reading it now.
Okay, great. That's super helpful to know, because boy, oh boy, that unlocks other interesting opportunities, like Klarna, who did become a bank. And like you said, Square got their banking papers in order to, be legally considered a bank, and which, among many things, allows them to do loans.
It's really in the central bank's interest right now. I know everyone's afraid of inflation, but right now they kind of need demand for a currency, with everything kind of going every direction. So, if they can make a bank, the bank kind of has to issue their currency,
Right.
There's another advantage of being a bank, by the way. They could borrow from the Fed window when you're a regulated bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
but you're borrowing U.S. dollars.
Right, but then they can loan
it also
those.
gives you superpowers during economic crises when it's like, oh no, the sky is falling. What will we do? If you're near the bank, that means that you're one of the groups that's guaranteed to survive.
Okay, but Shopify has a business debit card, and also they also have POS system.
They have this, but they have this in their mind. Like I saw an article on the Financial Post on May 2020, and this is their goal. They have they want to have a business account, balance, deposit, and everything. They want to go on this field.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's such a great question, Chris. Kudos for that, because if they do, they could then offer additional new APIs and products and services to all of their partners, which that's what they're focusing on, of course, is just ramping up all of these partnerships, business development we call it, or corporate development. Well, in this case, it's business development, and that, holy cow, that could get really interesting because, as you said, they could then work. If they form a really strong partnership, like Klarna is acquiring, Klarna is a Swedish buy now, pay later, which has evolved into a lot more than that and has tremendous market penetration all throughout Scandinavia. I mean, 90% of people use Klarna every month. So they were there in the headlines as well today. They acquired a startup called Apparel, and Cal read the headline. And he said he thought it's called April because it's spelled APPRL. I said, no, that's called Apparel because that's a friend of mine's company, by the way. And so I pinged him and he joined us in our last meeting, 7 hours ago. And he came in and explained why, what that partnership's going to look like with Apparel and Klarna. And he said something truly profound, which is that, as we've done countless times, we've talked about how the social media platforms are, going to e-commerceify. And there's basically three players involved. There's the influencer, on the platform, the social media platform. There's the buyer, obviously. And then there's the kind of finance transaction between them. And there's a company that handles, that as well. And then you've got, there's different ways these can combine. So in the case of the social media apps are partnering with Shopify. They bring the influencers and the buyers. That's two of the three. And then Shopify brings the finance layer. And, now you've got chocolate and peanut butter, and those go magically delicious together. And you've got yourself a nice little Reese's peanut butter cup. But in the case of Klarna is the finance layer, and they're acquiring these social media apps, which is they're coming at it from the other direction, which is, as he said, is truly brilliant because he was doing kind of a social commerce app that Klarna bought. And it's going to be interesting to see how all of these play out. But the banks, these neobanks, and you could call Square kind of a neobank, and you could call Klarna, they have their banking permit. Shopify doesn't. And when Shopify does, oh boy, that could get even additionally more interesting. And when Spotify adds a banking layer, that's going to get wild, crazy, fucking cool and interesting because record labels are banks and musicians do record deals to get loans, and they give up their rights as the collateral for that loan. And that usually doesn't work out so well. I'm speaking from personal experience here. So then...
And just to add, Tyler, they had the question asked to the JM Financial Solution at Shopify. And he said that the plan is to partnership with a financial institution in the years to come.
Shopify said that?
Yeah, it's an article I will send you from Financial Post last year. And it's the Kaz Nejatian that... is the VP General Manager of Shopify Financial Solution.
Okay, they are already collaborating with a bank called Evolve Bancorp to power the Shopify balance. So they need to collaborate with a financial institution with a banking license.
Shopify.
I DM you as well, Tyler. You can take a look at the article.
Yeah, I see it. It says Shopify Balance. It's something. Is this new? Is this a new headline?
End of 2020, I think. No, it's not new.
Okay.
It's pretty old already.
Yeah, I just sent you the article.
They're
December 2020.
I got you. They're currently working with Stripe. And as I said, now you know why Stripe is so powerful, because they bring and make it super easy to bring in kind of the financial layer in the back end. Shopify is more the shopping layer, the e-commerce layer. You still need the financial piping layer, which is Stripe. And so eventually Shopify bought a whole bunch of Stripe shares, like $350 million worth. Yep. So that's why Shopify hasn't gone through the trouble of becoming a bank, because they've invested very heavily into Stripe. And as Stripe grows, they continue to grow. It's kind of a smart move. It's almost like a partial merger. In fact, when you do it that way, when you buy a whole bunch of a piece of a partner in that way, where you grow together and you're happy that they grow and you grow. But then
it works in both parties' favor, right? It's kind of the new way of disrupting. You see the battery companies really taking the lead there.
Great
right?
example, I mean, with the cars.
They have a core. They have a core tech that's so. I'm sorry.
Do you remember Mercedes had Tesla shares?
Yeah. So, but that's such a good point. And this is the future is, go fast. And to go fast, you do partnerships rather than fight. And, you have less casualties and, less focus and resources on battles and more focusing your resources
and then
on growth.
As the innovator, your Department of No is going to tell you, like, don't do joint ventures. Don't do anything where you're not the ownership, full ownership of your IP. So as CEOs, we're kind of left at this kind of untenable position. I'm not going to sign an exclusive with the company, because I'll be boxing myself out of a big market, but I'm too small to try to do it myself, And so these joint ventures, these, invest at seed level, invest at earlier stage, take on the venture risk instead of the traditional players, is now kind of becoming the way that the deals are getting structured, at least from my vantage point.
So there's a headline that Jean-Francois found from about a month ago that says Shopify to launch its own take on the business bank account. Merchants in Shopify will be able to make deposits because you're on Shopify, you're a store and you're receiving payments. And so you'll be able to hold those payments in a kind of an account. And by making deposits, you'll be able to withdraw the money from that account, and you'll be able to pay bills from that account and track transactions. But it's not really a proper bank account. It's just like your own, kind of wallet inside. It's kind of a wallet, essentially.
Isn't it called a Shopify Balance?
It says Shopify says it plans on allowing merchants to start opening their own bank-like accounts. Bank-like within the U.S. later this year, which it hasn't done yet because this article is only a month old, so it's not Shopify Balance. Among other offerings, the Ottawa-based firm announced Wednesday.
I think it's a year old, Tyler. I'm not sure. It's a year old that they have.
Oh, it's 2020. Oh, you're right. So anyway, but now we know why they've not done their own proper bank thing, because they're in a partnership with Stripe, and at some point, and they might decide that it's they will be able to offer additional kind of products and services as they continue.
Tyler, there's probably another reason, very important reason. If they become a bank, they're subject to the Bank Holding Act, and the Bank Holding Act has a lot of restrictions on doing non-bank activities. So it's a really a complicated area. But there's certain things, like if you were doing mostly non-bank stuff, you may not want to be a bank because of the Bank Holding Act.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that. So moving on. The next biggest headline is from ZDNet, a report saying malware developers are increasingly writing malicious code in exotic programming languages like Golang to hamper analysis efforts and evade detection. There you go. That's clever. These hackers, I tell you, they are clever creatures. And indeed, that would be... Go ahead, Chris.
If anyone wants to have a real laugh with things, there is if you search on DuckDuckGo or Wikipedia, there is a website called a list of esoteric programming languages. And if you really want to get a sense of some of the bizarre humor, they have things like programming language written where the defined format is like cooking recipes, or like little type of you have to write like Shakespeare plays, and they're legitimate languages. They can compile into anything. They can compile into C and all these other things. So, but I can just imagine some of the decompiling we're going to see in the near future with as they take apart NSO Group or some of the future whatever hacker malware type kind of things, and it's going to be like they're going to choose the most hilarious languages just to funk with people when it breaches the headlines.
That's awesome, Chris.
And what else do we got? The next one is from TechCrunch about a Danish startup called Dixa, which helps companies manage their customer relations via messaging, email, and voice, rather than in person. And that was kind of my startup's bag way back in 2011. And I was a bit early. And now it makes a lot more sense now that we're going into e-commerce. You're going to need to get in touch. You need the customer service layer when the transaction goes bad, which means you're going to need a lot of messaging and email tools between the customers and the company. And then what else is there? Oh, here's a big one. This is a big one, and this is probably the biggest one of today. We found out something really interesting when we met 7 hours ago. Which no one has seemed to have figured out yet. And I've been predicting for a few weeks now that we're not in the not so distant future. We're going to have verified identities on all social media apps. That was my claim. Yes, someone remember that? Can I get a hallelujah and amen that I've been predicting?
Yes.
Okay, hallelujah, amen.
Hallelujah,
okay. Hallelujah. Can I get an amen? Okay, so.
You can get the Tyler told us so.
Yeah, I told you so. If you follow the Twitter account about once a week, I have a tweet that goes out that says "told you so" when we find a headline that's a prediction I have made here.
You need a music sound effect for that.
Yeah, it happens frequently enough. I do need my mystical sound effect when I predict.
Your validation.
Yes. So here's what's happening on that front. So this is kind of interesting. We'll go piece by piece here. There's quite a bit. But the first headline is actually from the website of the government of Australia in New South Wales, which is where Sydney is, by the way. So it's kind of the main area, the federal, the big part of Australia is called New South Wales. And the New South Wales government, which is kind of the federal government, has on their website, NSW, New South Wales, nsw.gov.au, media release, new Digital Identity Advisory Council established. And they want to the Minister for Digital and Customer Service brings together experts from a range of sectors to ensure personal privacy and security are enriched in all policy-making design. Being able to prove and trust identity digitally is a key foundation for modern society and drives productivity and innovation. The government is implementing a transformational digital agenda, including evolving the Service NSW app and blah, 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 blah. Now that's the headline from their own government website. Now I'm going to cut to a video from the main morning show in Australia, which just aired, a few hours ago, and listen to what they're saying on their big morning TV morning show. Here it goes.
By the federal government. For more Nine's Oliver Haig joins us live in Adelaide. Ollie, how will it work?
Layla, good morning. Essentially, it will work the same as a passport. Australians forced to submit 100 points of identification like their driver's license or passport when using social media accounts like Facebook and Twitter. Now, police would have access to those social media accounts, and it's all part of a crackdown on online abuse. Now, users could be liable for defamation suits or even criminal prosecution, and it's all part of a plan hoping to deter people from engaging in bad behaviour. Now, the recommendations were handed down by a federal parliamentary inquiry. They're reforms that are being considered by the Morrison government, with the chairman saying there is merit to remove the veil of being anonymous. Layla?
From the country that basically literally ripped out fiber from the home and basically turned over their entire economy to dial-up speeds, essentially to satisfy Murdoch, comes the latest amazing identification legislation for cutting-edge social media policy.
A driver's license, state IDs to use social media.
So I know a lot about this.
Go, Charles.
Talked with.
By the way, we're not done. It gets better.
Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the finishing points because it gets better. There's more. There's more. So it was revealed today that Apple iOS 15 Beta 3, which people just got a glimpse of today from outside of Apple, developers just got their hands on that today, and there's a new part to iOS 15, which we will all be downloading and updating our iPhones and sometime around next month with iOS 15. And then iOS 15 Beta 3, which all of the beta testers got today, all of the developers who have to test their apps, they get and I do as well. Jane gets it as well. And in this Beta 3 of iOS 15, there's a new part around digital identity. And let me pull this up because boy, oh boy, is this quite interesting. iOS 15 to roll out security verification system using selfies, Face ID confirmation. The latest beta of iOS 15 could soon introduce a new verification process through the user's selfies. Apple could possibly add a feature that will tighten the security among iPhone users through Face ID confirmation. People can guarantee that other people cannot steal their files and important documents on their smartphones, and etc. And it does. The blog that I'm reading right now is not as good as the one I read earlier, where you do like when you trained, the Face ID on your iPhone when you get the new operating system and you have to move your head around in a circle and all of that. You now also have to show State ID as part of this. Verification to include selfies during the process. Accessing the feature might take a while for the users, but adding the ID cards to the smartphone so that you can now save your state IDs, your driver's license can now be stored digitally inside of your iPhone, right? So now iPhone's going to know your state ID, and that's who you are to the state. They knew who you are biometrically by your face previously, but that's not tied to any state ID. Now it will be. And that's where things get really interesting because, there's more. Oh, yes, there's much, much more. We got a DM today from a friend of mine who I know, who I've engaged, who I've worked with, actually, who says he works for a notable software development team who has an iPhone app, and he DM'd while we were talking about this 7 hours ago. He says, when we submitted our iOS app for review last time, because when you update your app, you have to submit your app to the iOS Apple Store for them to review it. And then they review it, and then they approve it, and then it goes live, and then everyone gets the update. So when they submitted their iOS app for review last time, they were forced, Apple's now forcing them to add Apple Login. Now, Apple Login is their version of Facebook Login or Google Login. So when you want to, quote unquote, log into a third-party app like Tinder, like Shopify, like TikTok, like Instagram, you many times used Facebook Login. Well, guess what? Apple hates Facebook. And Apple knows that Facebook's login is one of the things that's keeping them alive. And so Apple wants to build an alternative to Facebook Login called Apple Login. And Apple Login will be a better experience for you as an Apple user, an iPhone user, because when you use Apple Login, you're not going to have to log into Facebook to verify that this service wants you. It's just going to be one click, boom, you're done. It's built into the hardware. It's not built into another website called Facebook or Google. It's a much more pleasant experience. It's one click. It's not 3 clicks and maybe even more clicks if your browser didn't recognize this. And you guys know what I'm talking about. No doubt you've all had this experience trying to log into apps through Facebook login or Google login. And now Apple login is going to be vastly superior. And more importantly, it's going to have your state ID, which Facebook login does not have, which Google login does not have. And now this is the craziest bit. Apple has all the apps. All of the apps for iPhone are in Apple's App Store. They can dictate to the small apps today, like my friend's app, oh, you want to update your app? That's nice. You now must use Apple Login to give your users the option to log in with Apple Login. Say what? I don't have a choice in this? No, you now need to use this. You know what this is going to do? This is going to force Apple login onto every app instantaneously. All of them, all the apps, because they control all the apps in the App Store. All of them, 100%. And they're going to start with the small apps, of course, who aren't able to fight back, and they're going to wait. And that's very clever. It's absolutely genius, because if they started with the big apps, Facebook is going to be like, hell no, we're not adding Apple login because we have our own thing, Facebook login. And Google's going to say hell no. And all the big apps are going to say hell no. But if they start with all the small apps and they get, all the, a million small apps that exist in the App Store to adopt this, now it's a recognized, usable, powerful thing. It becomes even bigger and more powerful than Facebook login or Google login. And the interesting part is it has your state ID. So this small app, your little small app, Tinder or whatever, now knows that this person who authenticated through Apple ID, that individual is known. Their state ID is verified. So this is digital, authenticated, verified identities are going to happen really quickly through iOS 15. And they're not even asking the apps if they want this. They're forcing the apps to take this. But what this will do, as you heard that Australian journalist say, is the governments and the apps will now, this is going to limit bad behavior and the bots. And by the way, the governments love this most of all, because now they're going to actually say, oh, yeah, you're going to need this identification because we've got this problem with these Russian and Chinese bot accounts that are causing massive political division in our social network apps. And this is an incredibly simple way to solve it. And this is that's just one of a whole bunch of massive problems that this solves. Of course, there are interesting potential negative consequences to this that we must explore. And we just in the process of, being geeks and doing that kind of fun talk, but
like antitrust,
all kinds of stuff. And I don't want to downplay. This is, your average consumer is not going to understand what they're getting into.
Tyler.
Yes, Jeremiah.
Hey, love the show. So there's one behavior to be clear about. If you upload your driver's license to your phone, you still need to bring your driver's license. I actually got pulled over by California police, and I got a small fix-it ticket for not having my driver's license, but I showed them a photo on my phone.
Yes.
And by the way,
which is very different.
You should never, ever give the cop your phone.
Right.
Ever.
That too.
Ever.
But yeah, that's the
one thing to know.
But you should also, this new system in iOS 15 is they're authenticating your state ID. It's not just a photo of your ID. It's just like you digitized your credit card in Apple Pay. They're going to digitize your state ID in their Apple Wallet.
So they've been doing it for air travelers and people that do that sort of thing with stuff. Half the people on the line right now log in with QR codes when they're getting on their passports and boarding stuff. This is just one level above that, I imagine.
I think it's all very fascinating. I wonder what happens to minors with iPhones. So I don't know what the average age is, but I know a lot of 13, 14-year-olds with their own iPhone. I wonder what happens for people who don't have the state ID.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty pro privacy and just in general with things, but this kind of makes a little bit of sense with things to have essentially a device that has that as a capability. Now, whether or not that actually provided is another aspect. If you have NSO group style stuff just outright stealing the data, that's not really going to work. But if you could make it secure and actually have it as oh yeah, it's here, it's available, you could actually do some kind of interesting things with that.
So Charles,
so I have the largest database at Clearview of state IDs on the planet. And so I've been following this debate for a very long time. And essentially what's happening in Australia is, remember who rules Australia, which is the Murdoch family. And they want to put the hurt on Google and Facebook. And in the case of Facebook, there's all sorts of questions about Facebook actually advertising to bots or to fake users. And so what this is really, one should really see this as an anti-Facebook measure, because Facebook really enjoys all of the fake users on its platform because they can essentially defraud advertisers that way.
Let me explain that, because they're telling you, oh, we showed your ad to 1,000 people and it turns out half of them are bots.
Correct.
Right.
And this is well known.
It's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is extremely well known, like among people who've dealt with Facebook. It's known by board members at
Yeah,
Facebook.
it exists. Yeah.
Reddit
It's
does the same thing.
right. So I think what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to be a lot like Korea or China, or basically the West generally, where the government knows with a high degree of probability everything you're doing online, and I think that that's going to be a very different online experience, to put it mildly.
Okay, so throwing one more dynamic on here, Tyler, to a little bit of context and color. So we brought up Murdoch, and essentially Charles is saying that they rule Australia with things, and he's not entirely wrong on that. But here's another dynamic. So Murdoch is old, and his kids are not the most brilliant cookies in the thing, but still,
I like Lachlan. No, I'll say this. I like Lachlan. James is kind of all over the place, but Lachlan, like, I mean, Lachlan and I are friendly. I mean, he wants to be president of. I mean, he wants to be king of Australia too. But yes, I mean, when Murdoch sold to Disney his assets, I mean, he was telling friends it was because he didn't think he could beat Facebook and Google. And so now there are ways that there are all sorts of ways that Facebook is having the hurt placed on it, as is Google. And this is I think net beneficial for world civilization, because I too share a dislike of those companies.
Well, so here's the interesting thing. So Murdoch essentially successfully killed like internet in Australia, like very very efficiently with things, like literally throttled. They had basically funded legislation for fiber to the home. They went in and ripped out fiber. That's how bad it was. Okay, now here's the interesting thing, because it competed with this cable news monopoly with things. Now here's the interesting thing. Adding some context, Tyler, you got those pipe organs with things, because here's where it gets to be fun. So Zuckerberg makes this whole alliance with saying, hey, look, we're going to be friends with churches and stuff. And who does he choose as like their big, like, whoever his division chief was, choose as the big thing? They say, we're going to sponsor with Hillsong. Not just any Hillsong, the mainland in Hillsong with stuff. Now here's the fun thing about Hillsong. The current, basically, Prime Minister of Australia, that's where he comes from, is the Hillsong church community, and it's actually a flashpoint in local politics.
Yep.
Zuckerberg is literally basically saying, I've basically got my fingers and tendrils into the Prime Minister's office of Australia. He is going directly after Murdoch's thing there, and they've been having turf battles over that country with stuff. It's really interesting to watch at a distance. It's like Zuckerberg wants to be the next Murdoch of Australia.
Oh, check this out. So the friend of mine who DM'd me earlier today saying when we submitted our iOS app for the review last time, they were literally forcing us to add login with Apple, now sent me the receipt of the message from Apple to their relatively small app, which says, directed them to their resolution center, where it says your app uses a third-party login service, like meaning they're probably using Facebook login, or Google login, which everybody does, and says your app uses a third-party login service but does not offer sign-in with Apple. Apps that use third-party login service for account authentication need to offer sign-in with Apple to users as an equivalent option. Next steps. Please revise your app to offer sign-in with Apple.
I have a guess why they are implementing this right now.
Why?
The thing is that Facebook announced that they were going to launch games on Facebook that are not requiring the Apple 30% tax.
Uh-huh.
So this is why.
Heresy.
Multiverse versus multiverse. This is the login thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So by stopping them from using the Facebook login, they will for games on even web browsers. Yeah, you were screwed again.
Okay, so here's a fun one. So I actually got to talk to the guy that designed the internal review system for Apple when they're saying we've got an app, should we accept it or not? And I said, what does this look like to them? And he's like, actually, it's kind of sad. Like this was 10 years ago, so keep in mind my information is a lot of it. They've probably updated since then, but this gives you an idea of the kind of place that it is. So what they have is they said, how long does it take to review it? It's like, well, it takes about 30 seconds. I'm like, what do you mean it takes 30 seconds? Like, well, we've got like this thing, and what does it basically? It's mostly automated, but we still need to have a human review aspect to it. And he says most of the apps, within a very short amount of time, like it gives you like a composite overview of all the little things, so you can quickly skip around the entire thing. But he says what's interesting is that he says the majority of apps, within the first 10, 15 seconds, if it's going to be a thing, because most of them are crap, and then the ones that actually go through are actually very, very polished and everything. He says they have it literally as set up like a Tinder type system where you swipe left or swipe right. If you say yes, then it goes into the approval queue. There's one more set of checks after that. if you do the rejection queue, it automatically drafts essentially all the things to find wrong in it and say, yeah, this thing needs so much attention. But it's entirely an automated system for doing the rejection part of it. So basically, developers have spent months of their life are basically saying maybe Apple will like it, maybe they won't. It's impressively capricious. So when they stand up on their stage saying we have essentially all this stuff, like we have carefully reviewed every last one of them, it's like, well, they do have some impressive automated tools, but it's not exactly the same level of extreme level of labor that they tell the regulators about. Little tiny pieces of information like that end up being very useful in antitrust regulations. By the way, if anyone needs some more little juicy details, on things.
There's very little appetite for regulating Apple through antitrust, because Apple is basically doing what the government wants here, which is making it so that everybody is known to the government through these phones. So if you look at the US, we had ICOP, which got all this attention, and in spirit of full disclosure, Clearview is one of the main providers for ICOP, which is essentially, it's the Internet Surveillance Bureau run by the Post Office, of all things, in the US. And so what you kind of need to understand is, like, Apple. So first of all, Apple wants everybody to be known on their platforms, because then they can go and sell ads that are much more effective than Facebook and Google. That's sort of like what we're really talking about here, is the ad market more than anything else. And that's really going to be a way in which they can afford to come down off their 30% pricing and 30% cut on the apps. What I would do if I were running Apple, for those who are listening or Apple connected, is I would make a trade. I'd say, you have to integrate this stuff eventually, and in exchange for doing it faster, we'll give you some relief on the 30% cut.
And then, Johan, help people understand. Let's unpack that bomb that you dropped about Facebook in the past 48 hours announced that they're going to try and circumvent the App Store by building a web browser gaming thing, yeah?
Yeah. And because this with the 30% tax,
right?
We can call it tax at least.
Yeah, and that's to avoid the 30% Apple tax by being in part of the Apple Store. So that they're like, okay, fine, we're not going to put our app in the App Store. We're going to make a web browser app in Safari or Chrome, and then people can pay inside the browser, and we get 100% of that without giving Apple their 30% cut, right?
Yeah, but the thing is here that these apps and these games will need an authentication server, and since everything in Apple is either Safari or this WebKit, which actually is Safari anyway, they still need to. Facebook will have the users to authenticate in the web browser.
In the browser,
and
yeah. So Apple could still force them to authenticate, and so Apple will still know, you're trying to charge. They might now force. Well, that would be really wild, because that would basically remove.
I guess that's where they're aiming for, is that one of the largest platforms that actually gives them quite a revenue with all these downloaded games like Farmville, etc. Have announced that they will try to circumvent. Yeah, they will circumvent the payment through the Apple. And Apple said, okay, you can try, but you won't be able to log in for these apps on our platform in our browser. So, yeah, you can try it. It will blow up in your face, and you will pay us anyway.
But
Bend over, sir.
You're probably right that they will force identification pretty much throughout. Even if you log into a web browser-based app, they're going to kind of start forcing the Apple ID thing. And that, thank you to my friend who sent the receipts on the Apple transaction, communication, that they are forcing apps to use Apple ID, which, by the way, is going to have state IDs kind of bundled in with it, and that has really interesting implications that we could talk about endlessly. I'm just still kind of stunned that this is happening so quickly, because I've been saying, obviously all the signs, these little breadcrumbs were pointing us in this direction, that the government is going to push this kind of in this direction. Interesting that Apple is kind of playing a hand in that. and not only playing a hand in it, kind of forcing the hand on it on the apps. That I didn't see that coming. I thought it was going to be the state forcing the apps, and it's not the state forcing the apps. It's Apple forcing the apps in compliance with the state. So all the state had to do was tell Apple, hey, Apple, you know what? You're going to need to force your own Face ID system on them, and it's going to be a better experience for the user. So it's actually in your favor to force this on every app in your app store. Of course, they're going to do the same to Google very soon. This is going to be
Apple is on the Prism side like everyone else. To their credit, they're the last one on, but it's like that. It's the same thing for all the other tech companies and stuff. They're just like the others. They're just late to the game.
This will not be possible in Singapore, by the way. It's illegal.
Hey, Tyler, there was an article in Wired last month where they actually talked about Apple working with the government on this due to the Real ID Act.
Oh, really?
With the government. Yeah, I'll send it to you
please
on
do.
Twitter. And they also talk about in the Wired article that they're actually working with the TSA to also use Apple ID as a driver's license to verify who you are at the airport. So it's been covered already. So there's been hints at it as well.
Yeah.
So I'll send that to you on Twitter, Tyler.
No, that's because
Charles is flashing his mic.
Okay. Yeah, NEC, which is a Japanese company, is like aligned with China, and they've been doing a lot of the TSA, like going through TSA kind of setups. And so here, what I was told basically at the beginning of the Biden administration by one of the senior folks is that Microsoft was in trouble because it essentially had all these software holes in it, and that allowed the Russians, the Israelis, and the Chinese to hack a lot of things. Google was in trouble because it was basically committing ad fraud. Same thing with Facebook, and that Amazon and Apple were the two companies to look at very closely as being pro-Biden, benefiting from the Biden administration. And so far, everything I've seen, from contracts being taken back from different players given to Amazon, to Apple playing ball with the government on all kinds of matters. I mean, it basically that confirms what I was told in the early days.
Okay. David, you had your hand up. I'm just inviting you up. I'm not sure if it's working. Hopefully it is.
I sent you the article, Tyler, by the way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jay. And you just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account, right? Or DM'd on the Twitter. I see it. I think, yeah, there you are. Thank you for that. Apple says it's time to digitize your ID. Ready or not is the headline from Wired. Oh boy, that's interesting. Digital driver's licenses have had a slow start in the US so far, but iOS 15 wallet will give the nascent technology a serious push. If you've ever scanned a digital boarding pass directly from your phone at the airport security, you can imagine how doing the same with your driver's license could make it a little easier. Beginning in iOS 15 this fall, Apple will enable just that, letting you store your state ID alongside your credit cards, loyalty program, transit passes, even door and car keys, blah, blah, blah. By doing so, the company won't just introduce convenience. It will well be the tipping point that forces more states, the U.S. government, and even Android to make digital driver licenses the norm. Yes, that's...
It's interesting to note that essentially that driver's licenses themselves were controversial when they were first introduced as a thing. Like just throwing it out there. I mean, it's one of those things that's like, well, if you're driving on the highway, it's like a thing. It's interesting we're now getting to the point where essentially that the digital environment is considered to be of equal amount of responsibility or threat to physically driving 2 tons of metal around at high speeds. It's an interesting, at least legally, we're moving into that sort of danger level recommendation.
Okay.
Well, for those who are interested, the book here to read is Seeing Like a State, which essentially makes the argument that the state is always trying to canvass the new frontiers so as to tax them and regulate them. And so here the state is arguing that its sovereignty exists into the virtual domain, which I think is probably right.
Okay, next into the big news articles is from VentureBeat. They say a company called LogicGate, which helps automate corporate governance, risk and compliance processes, raise $113 million. And indeed, this is just helping companies go fully remote, basically, in the endless fundraisings. Anyone doing on anything that helps a company become more remote, where you can now delegate out your HR and have this kind of subscription HR service that does all your HR for you. And they happen to be very skilled at doing HR for international team members spread all over the planet willy-nilly. and then you've got new accounting systems that help with internationalized issues, and now you've got corporate governance issues, and you even have the stock certificate aspect of everything is now becoming fully digitized and able, so that everyone can do everything remote. You can build actual companies without anyone in the company ever meeting physically, ever, from the investors to the team members to the HR to the accountants to everything. And if you're doing a startup that helps enable that, you're likely to get funded if you have a legitimate solution that helps enable that. And this is one of those. LogicGate helps automate corporate governance, risk, and compliance processes. And next up, IBM report in 2021, the average data breach cost companies $4.24 million to fix, which is up 10% year over year. What? It almost sounds like a quarterly earnings report. The cost to fix a hack is now up 10% year over year. Mega breaches involving 50 million plus customer records can cost over $400 million. Oh boy.
Is that how much they bill the insurers for? Because that's actually kind of an interesting metric, because
it is.
The assessments on that are kind of interesting.
It is. Yeah, so what does that work out to? 50 million customer records they value at $400 million. That's like $8 per customer is what they're averaging that out to.
Hello. What would be a lot more interesting instead of dollars per customer? I'd like to see months of jail time per executive. That would be a much more interesting metric.
Insider, the next big article from Bloomberg, and it says Insider suggests China's internet companies, which have long emulated Silicon Valley's founder-driven model, will align more with China's leadership after tech crackdown. Oh boy. Cal, what was the headline that we read 7 hours ago that so perfectly put it? It was, Jesus.
Well, they basically confirmed that they're creating, I'll go find it, that they're creating the data.
Yes, the
data platform.
The government's creating the data platform for all the companies to integrate with.
The ultimate.
Yeah, but it was literally a headline from
one ring to bring them all, one ring to bind them.
It was precisely that, and it said it very pithily. It was like, the state is developing a mother app to integrate all.
You tweeted it, right?
I must have, yeah. So it's probably in the.
We just have to crunch it together in Utah. That's really it's all oh wait, don't let everyone know. We've got 50, 100, whatever, all these different systems, and you need the Clearview stuff to clutch it together. I mean, it's very slapdash behind the scenes.
Well, this is a very how do I put this? This is basically a very Chinese solution to this problem, right? Whereas in the United States, essentially what happens is you have an oligopoly and you have behind the scenes sort of gentleman's agreement on these sorts of data sharing agreements. So I think what I've always loved about the Chinese is they make explicit what we make implicit. And so I kind of think that this is going to be a very interesting case study to see how the internet develops. Obviously, their system is basically now almost explicitly under state control, whereas ours is more wink, wink, nudge, nudge under state control.
I've said the same, Charles. I've said in a weird way, I actually admire and kind of in a strange way respect just how obvious they are about it. And like you said, not convert. It's very out in the open. We don't allow your apps in our country. End of story. We're not being cagey about it. We're not being shy about it. It's just, it is what it is. Here it is, bada boom.
And it's very honest in a way, and wish that the U.S. would retaliate in kind.
I've said the exact same thing, that the U.S. is actually a bit guilty of being certainly not as transparent in its kind of, it's kind of done, as you said, winky, winky, nudge, nudge in the background a bit. So anyway.
It's such a risky idea, Tyler, to put all of their apps together, because it exposes so much to their it just increase the concentration risk, right? Just one hack, they can take down all their mothership. So I think
be quiet, Armin.
Yeah.
Be quiet.
Yeah, totally.
Tyler,
yes.
I think they're not just not transparent; they are always suspicious of others doing that to them.
Yeah,
because they do
I'm
to
very
others.
much in favor of them putting all of their eggs in one basket and then stealing the basket or smashing it.
Well, another thing is going to be. I'm sorry.
I just retweeted it.
Yeah, just simply America's sorry, Cal. Just the point simply is the government and just the states. We need to kind of put a bit of a clamp down on Facebook. I mean, there's proof of how they had an influence in the last couple of elections. So there's kind of Chinese aren't going to bullshit around with that stuff.
Right. So here's the headline. Cal just retweeted it, and I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. And it says, China is laying the groundwork to nationalize private companies' data. The new data exchange rules could require companies to provide data to the government and other firms.
You know, it'd be awesome if we actually were able to, like in America, if we could give like a full-throated defense of like in freedom and press freedom and like privacy. And it'd be really nice if we could do that and say, you're doing a bad thing, China. It's frustrating because we've never clearly articulated our own values. It's more of like an ethos of like a general aspirational idea of a like feeling, like an emotional state rather than a more concrete thing. And I think this is one of the places where we're seeing some of that weakness, because it means when China says, look, we have more data, so we make more AI, so we have this, and we're saying, oh no, we're losing the AI race. It's like, yes, you're losing the AI race to authoritarianism. I mean, you don't have to go down that road. You could choose another one, but as long as we let consultants decide this,
we are going to become a lot more like them, and they are going to become a lot more like us. This is just the nature of sort of how these things go. And I think in the U.S., we're kidding ourselves if we don't claim to have national champions. I mean, Boeing, Amazon, I mean, these are very much national champions, and we should just be honest about that.
So Bloomberg says, one second. Bloomberg says the danger with this approach is that it could have a chilling effect on innovation. As one Chinese unicorn founder put it, this new China tech model would, quote unquote, help hold back some over creative ideas. Although this was meant as approval, it can also be read as a scarily restrictive view of innovation. The war for control over data could also threaten the Cayman Islands' status as the bridge between the superpowers. William Kirby, a Harvard professor who specializes in Chinese business studies, notes that Washington has passed legislation that threatens to delist the stocks of Chinese companies that don't submit documentation for audits, potentially exposing the data China wants to keep for itself. Oh boy, that's an interesting little wrinkle.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, fine, you can have your own companies, and they can have their own data collection, but they're not going to touch our banking and regulatory systems. And we already saw that with Alipay and and WeChat, and we're starting to see that across the larger economy. And I should say too, like, there are a whole number of Silicon Valley companies that are trying to get into the defense space, but when you scratch the surface, you see that they have Chinese LPs in their funds, or that they're involved in some sort of shady Chinese or Russian kind of operations in terms of their funding. And they're all upset because, they're saying, oh, well, the Washington, D.C., they won't allow us to get contracts. Like, how rude is this? And it's like, well, you didn't build the company with trusted capital sources. You decided you wanted to take that sugar high of high valuations propped up by Chinese, Russian investors. And this is what happens. So I think you're going to see a lot more Silicon Valley companies be sort of punished here than you might otherwise expect.
Yeah, but I just want to add one thing. I mean, we can say what we want about China, and to Tyler's point, in some ways it's admirable, but they also telegraph their views way ahead of time. I mean, I found their March 5-year plan release where that clearly stated that the Chinese government policy is to consider data as a national factor of production, and that they will be implementing policies with that effect. So they said that in March, and then they started doing this in June, July. So if we start reading that stuff, a lot of these guys could have pulled their money out, right? I mean, it's...
Oh, I do this all the time, Vinay. I mean, I went to this lecture a while back where Beijing Genomics Institute's head said that his dream was to sequence every living thing of consequence. And I remember thinking, like, damn, that's ambitious. And like, we need to pay attention here. And then when we were building Clearview, I mean, we read every single
hold my DNA sample, Google.
Yeah. And so of course, China goes and invests in Blackstone, which of course buys Ancestry, and then China also does, I think, a Series E for 23andMe. So, if we're upset with these sorts of things, we have only ourselves to blame. And they even write this stuff in English. I mean, there's really no excuse.
Exactly. I actually found their 5-year plan in English. I tweeted it a couple of days ago, Tyler, and it's so evident. It just said we are going to call data a national factor of production like land, labor, capital. It's there.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I don't think
again,
any of us should be
I have
surprised.
to say I admire, and let's recognize the fact that China is likely the first government to really understand data the same way the geeks do. And yeah, go ahead.
Can I just cite out that I've never heard the term over creative before? That is a very unique use of a term. I'm just thinking about what that means.
Yeah. I know it's a wild. That's a very 1984-ish type term, isn't it?
Well, it's an attempt to try to describe innovation, right? But the problem is a lack of deployment of what do you say, just deployment grade software. That's the problem, right? So from a cybersecurity perspective, privacy perspective, the attempts that are starting to happen to clean up just how buggy this whole hack culture for however many years it's been dominating is starting to get a backhand, which is good for everybody.
I should also cite out with things that it's interesting when we're looking at like this policy is reflecting a degree, I don't want to say nuance necessarily, but a degree of understanding that doesn't seem to be evident in a we sell ad senator type kind of thing in our own environment in USA. One thing I think is kind of interesting about this is that with the clampdown on the tech companies, they might be making the gamble that essentially it's like, well, maybe a lot of these innovative tech companies, all these consumer sector stuff, maybe they're not actually the actual engine of the economic growth. Maybe it's actually the underlying hardware, the semiconductors and such. Which, if that is the case, and I don't know if they've actually made that judgment or not, but if they have, that's actually very dangerous. Because the thing is that we're currently making a lot of our timelines on whether or not it's like, oh, they're going to invade Taiwan? Is there going to be like a whole thing about this back and forth? With the idea of saying, well, they got to have advanced semiconductors do their shit. The thing is, if you understand the underlying hardware and you really understand how to basically integrate that across the entire supply chain, you don't need that advanced semiconductors to do a lot. I mean, you can do a lot with even older technology. The thing is, most of the people that basically advise government legislators, they say you need the latest and greatest for everything, otherwise you're going to lose out on X, Y, or Z. So it'd be interesting if their policy people actually understand that level, which would affect the timetables for a lot of the geopolitics stuff. I don't know, just kind of spitballing here, but it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think, though, that the U.S. is not paying attention on things. And I think it's because the Silicon Valley world is a lot louder than the Virginia, northern Virginia kind of ecosystem. And so I think one of the things I've come to realize is that there's a lot of gangster rappers in tech, and that this is ultimately what leads to a lot of downfall here. That there's much more quiet operations, particularly with our British partners, than I think a lot of Americans realize.
There's an article that was out yesterday that SEC official says U.S. listed Chinese companies must disclose government interference risk. I think it's all companies, isn't it?
Yeah, here it is. I got it. SEC official says U.S. listed Chinese companies must disclose government interference risks because Didi had a government interference issue that they didn't disclose, and so now the SEC realizes, oh boy, who's next? Who's going to get clamped down on? And if you as a company know you're going to get clamped down on, you need to notify us, and if you don't, you could be responsible. So the Chinese companies listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange must disclose the risks of the Chinese government interfering in their business. Oh boy!
Chances of us not existing in a few days, just at any one time. Is there a gun held to our head?
Democratic Commissioner Allison Lee's comments are the first by the SEC official since Chinese regulators launched a cyber probe of Didi Global last week. Over the past decade, Washington policymakers have focused on getting U.S.-listed Chinese companies to comply with U.S. Public Company Accounting Oversight Board rules. And indeed, this is obviously a reaction to Didi. Where they said,
I think next generation fertility clinics would do much better in China. I think people should invest there.
But if all Chinese companies' data belongs to the state, then that means there will be 100% interference, isn't it?
Ooh. It's an interesting point. Yeah, because the U.S. is going to say, you want to be listed in the U.S., you probably will have to have your data in the U.S., and China's going to say, no, absolutely not, no way in hell. And so you probably will. It's just kind of the inevitable kind of final stage of the divorce settlement is becoming more clear.
Splinternet.
By this logic of the SEC, shouldn't they also say, hey, just like it happened to Huawei, the US government might do something to your company and you have to disclose that too? I mean, give me a break.
Oh, you're right.
It's not like the
It's a
US
great
has
point.
been very...
That's a great point. China will retaliate and say exactly the same, which is if you want to be on an American, I mean, but the problem is American companies, I mean, who can you name a company specifically that they might target Apple or somebody to try and put? Yeah,
They're
I
never going to let
actually
Palantir get
tweeted.
those Chinese government
Sorry.
contracts anymore. They were really gunning for those.
I
Sorry, are
actually
you asking what
tweeted
the
it.
SEC would do to prevent Chinese companies listing or prevent U.S. companies on Hong Kong?
Neither. We're talking about the SEC just made it very clear that U.S. listed Chinese companies must disclose government interference risks because Didi didn't quite make it clear.
He's no longer with us.
Yeah,
that's those. Oh, sorry, those risk factors are. They're done actually usually in the division of Corp Fin. That's not like a top down decision. That's like looking at what current risks have evolved. That means somebody, not just because of this news, but somebody also thought to include it in a disclosure. And they put that as a risk factor, like they've seen it somewhere that it is a significant enough risk that someone else felt it was important to put it in there. And those, like, there are lots of risk factors that are situational specific, and some people get very upset by the ones that need to be included in, like right after the 2001, the 9/11 thing. So there were a lot of different things saying that if you had anybody in Pakistan or Iraq or Saudi Arabia that was related to the company, you had to put in a specific risk factor about that, like it could be shut down for terrorist operations, or the operations could be like destroyed by warfare or whatever it is. You have to put in all of these risk factors. They're basically like the risk factors themselves are mostly because disclosure protects companies. I don't know that companies really realize that. The more you say on these documents, the more it protects you from someone being able to sue you later on because you didn't tell them. So people look at this the wrong way. And I think that that's the way that the reason that they're doing that is anybody who has even a remote risk should put it in there, because then if something does happen, they'll be able to say, you can't sue me for it.
Right. So every Chinese company is now going to have to say, we could get wiped out in a minute's notice.
Yep.
And they all will do that going forward. They have no choice but to do that because the ed tech companies all just got wiped out. 98% of their value just got wiped out in the course of 2 trading days. So they're just going to have to, every Chinese company is going to have to say that now because they don't know that they can or not, and they're just going to have to disclose, buyer beware, this stock could disappear within 24 hours.
This is also one of the ways that China's basically, for many years, that China's money, essentially, when you say you make it big, you're a new tech billionaire in China with things, this is one of the ways that you can basically move your money overseas. It's not necessarily a direct money thing. It's like, oh, hey, this is equity. It's not worth anything. Oh, wait, it was worth something. Wait, I can take a loan against that. And what do you know? I now have a bunch of houses in Vancouver and other places. And it's one of the ways of setting that up overseas. And China essentially, I don't know. So recently, one of the things they started to clamp down on, and this was like 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years, if you hadn't gotten your money out of China, you're kind of screwed. So essentially, everyone that basically got in after that time period is like, no, you're either loyal to the party or we're going to bring you back home. There was a whole thing on the fox hunt type kind of thing where they would basically go take extraordinary measures to bring people back into the China's fold with stuff under corruption charges, what they would say. But some of them were, but a lot of it is just the fact of centralizing anyone that has wealth overseas so they don't cause trouble for the party when they start going all expansionist. So this is an aspect of one of the final stages of closing one of the last loopholes for getting your money overseas and basically saying, I have an independent power base and independent wealth base that's separate from under party control. This removes one of the last ones. So this is part of that crackdown.
Okay, moving on. New topic. So
actually, quick question.
Go ahead.
One thing that you haven't talked about was the people side, because if you talk about the population undergrowth, right? If you could inspire a population to think that the government is protecting them and helping them get the best education for a cheap price, I'm sure populations would actually start copulating. I'm just thinking.
Okay. So the next,
Just can I just quickly,
real
just 10
quickly.
seconds. Yeah, very 10 seconds. I just tweeted actually Apple is the most exposed company, US tech company. They say that so far they are, weathering the storm because of their relationship, but they are the most exposed company. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you, Messi. So the next article up is that Twitter hires the team that built Brief, the subscription-based news summary app founded by former Google employees, and the app will wind down July 31st, but they're bringing them in, and it's subscription and it's news and it's interesting, and they've acquiring other similar teams recently all around subscription and news, and getting very interesting indeed, because a lot of the news publications are paywalling their content now, which is rendering Twitter a little less useful, because you're tweeting links to each other, but then when you open the link, you only get the first paragraph and nothing else. So Twitter's kind of coming up with clever workarounds where it's a subscription. In this case, there's a couple of them now. The other one was called Scroll, where you pay $5 a month and it kind of gets you around all of the paywalls, basically. And it turns into a really interesting conversation around why can't we just pay 1 penny to unlock on a per article basis rather than subscribing to the New York Times and Bloomberg and everybody else, Financial Times. Can't I just pay a penny per article? That would be great. And hopefully we can create the right financial infrastructure pipeline, piping to enable that, but because you need really low fees for those transactions to occur. And that's kind of what Scroll is it's you're paying all those fees once a month in the form of $5, and then they delegate it out in mass to those publishers. So it's a really clever kind of system. And but yeah, Twitter's trying to get doing interesting acquisitions in these role of subscriptions and whatnot. And to that point, they also just have a breaking news headline right now that Cal just found, which is that Twitter is piloting a new shopping section for brands. Oh, who could have seen this coming? Where's my sound effect for yet another prediction coming true? So starting with a pilot around a dozen brands, Twitter is piloting a new feature that allows businesses to add a shopping section to the top of their profiles where you can buy products from their Twitter accounts. Oh, you mean Twitter is going to become e-commerceified? Can I get a penny for every time I've said that in the last 4 months?
Hallelujah.
Can I get an amen? So
hallelujah.
The shop module.
Hallelujah.
The shop.
Can we have a
You need to have like the hallelujah like theme track thing.
I need a soundtrack. Hallelujah. You're right.
We need a Tyler Shadow portfolio just to see how much it's up based upon all this.
I should start selling access to my actual portfolio. So,
Tyler Sound Deck. I'm definitely down, just to sit here every time Tyler says something, I'll buy like $10 worth of a share, or something.
Yep.
Juicy data.
It's called the Juicy Data Fund. Yeah.
It's like the bingo cards.
The Twitter user interface is so ugly. Which brand will use it?
Okay, so on
the first story, Tyler, this value-added news experience that you cultivated is much better than browsing around across Google News. So hats off, buddy.
Thanks. So Twitter
is
faster
than Slashdot.
Yep. Oh, dude. For those who don't remember Slashdot, yeah, that's near and dear to my heart. So the shop module, they call it, launches in the US today and offers a carousel of products for visitors to browse and, of course, shop. Tapping on the product will link to a listing with the option of making a purchase without ever leaving Twitter. They did it. That's it. That's what that. You hear that sound? Did you hear that? Did somebody hear something? I heard something. Gal, did you hear something?
We did it.
Is that a cash register? What's that? Who's got a cash register?
And Twitter's up 4% today.
Twitter's got a goddamn cash register built into their goddamn social network now.
Magic.
They did it.
They figured it out.
They figured it out.
How to become revenue positive.
Yeah,
the Christmas miracle.
The pilot is currently limited to iOS devices for people who use the service in English. Twitter says, here's the quote: "People talk about products on Twitter every day." So we're excited about how this early exploration of the shop module can build a bridge between people talking about and discovering products on Twitter to actually purchasing them. Oh, wow. That's so smart, Twitter. The pilot is only available with a small number of brands for now, including GameStop, Arden Cove, and around 10 others. Twitter did not reveal a timeline for when it might expand to more brands. Other social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Pinterest, have also used new features to turn their services into shopping destinations. And even Twitter has previously experimented with embedding a buy button directly into tweets. The shop module pilot comes as Twitter is exploring ways of making money beyond showing ads. In this year alone, Twitter has announced a paid subscription service with access to premium features, as well as plans to let users charge for access to exclusive content and a tip jar feature for one-off payments.
So one of the fun little tricks a lot of people don't realize that you can do is, it doesn't matter if you communicate over super secure, like, signal communications or encrypted everything. If you send a fucking YouTube link to someone else over the internet, you two become linked together, intertwined, your destinies forever bound. And what's really fun about this is if you happen to talk about certain subjects or anything that's happening in their life, one of the fun tricks that Google will use is where for YouTube, is they will advertise not to the person, yeah, they'll do that too, but they'll advertise for everyone in their social circle. So you'll happen to know, oh, I guess my friend's having a baby right now. I guess another friend's basically buying a house. Oh, I guess there are other things. So we're going to start having this ambient awareness layer of, like, every single thing said or mentioned is a potential monetization event. Every interaction in life is a potential for commerce. So it's hats off to the races. It's going to be exciting, guys, folks.
By the way, that'll change the algorithm such that, they used to organize the algorithm based on what you find most interesting. Now they have to organize the algorithm based on what will make them the most money. So your birth announcements, wedding announcements, and all those kinds of things will take priority because now, they just had a child. Why don't you go ahead and buy them this thing right here, right now? So it's going to get wild. It's a great point.
When does Square and Twitter merge?
Sorry.
When do Square and Twitter merge? Isn't that the obvious outcome here?
I mean, they're share CEOs, so.
Well, in one example that I proposed to their CFO, Ned, who's a lovely guy, by the way, we did a Twitter Space. Their version of Clubhouse is called Twitter Spaces, and they piloted me as one of the first 1,000 people on Twitter that can use Twitter Spaces, and they themselves were using it. So Ned, the CFO, who I have to say again is a lovely and very smart dude, jumped into my Twitter Space, and I took the opportunity to ask him when all of these creators, are starting to monetize on Twitter because by the way, the headline we just read is products are going to be clickable and buyable on Twitter now. Well, guess what? The next step is what I think TikTok just announced yesterday, which is influencers are going to be able to get a cut by promoting those products from their Twitter accounts. So I see this product that's purchasable directly, in a single click without ever leaving Twitter from one of these 12 brands that they just announced, Arden, whatever, who it was, right? So I'm an influencer on Twitter. I got 1 million followers. I can then tweet that clickable, purchasable thing from one of those 12 brands, and I get a cut of that. And now I'm monetizing my Twitter influence. That's what's coming. Make no mistake about that. So,
can I get a cut of Tech News Around the World mugs, Tyler?
Sure, of course you can. So, by the way, the point in I forget. There's a really interesting point why I say that. Anyway, yeah, the influencers are going to be selling and profiting off of that. Oh, so back to Ned. When I was asking the CFO of Twitter, I said, "Listen, so I sell something. I made a commission. Where's that money going to go? My commission. Who's holding that commission? Where's that? I just made $2 from, somebody clicking and buying this, luggage suitcase or whatever." And I said, you have Square, the same CEO, Jack Dorsey. Maybe you've heard of him. You're the CFO. Maybe you've heard of the CEO at your company at Twitter called Jack Dorsey. He has another company called Square that I'm pretty sure you've heard of. And they make a wallet. And that wallet holds money. Is it not possible that every Twitter account will now automatically have a Square? It's called the Cash App. So the Cash App is their digital wallet app. So would not every Twitter user then have a Cash App digital wallet, which, by the way, also accepts crypto? In fact, it accepts Bitcoin, and it allows for Bitcoin transfers between Cash App holders. So is it possible then that the tip jar might also accept Bitcoin, and I can hold it in Bitcoin, and now I can transfer between Bitcoin, and I can tip other Twitter users in Bitcoin, and I can then start buying the products in Bitcoin and holding the Bitcoin? Again, Jack Dorsey seems wildly excited about Bitcoin. He just held a whole goddamn conference with Elon Musk all about Bitcoin and nothing but Bitcoin, and about the future and how do we drive adoption of Bitcoin. Well, that's how you could do it. And so I said, Ned, do you think are we going to see that in the near future? He said, that's a great question. And then
Tyler, I'm sorry.
And well, the closing thought is, I then did a tweet saying, just had an interview with Twitter CEO where I asked him the following, and he said, great question. And then he liked my tweet. So I think we might see something like that in the near future, to Charles's great point, which is kind of this merger between Square and Twitter.
So meaning to say that Square will take all the risk of the Bitcoin, and then consumers will just buy things as it is now, but Square will take the risk of collecting the Bitcoins? Is that what you're trying to say?
I don't think...
no, you're holding the Bitcoins in your wallet.
I don't want Bitcoin.
You don't have to take them if you don't want them.
The context I would use is simply back in the 90s when we were kind of like thinking through how all this was going to unfold, just when Amazon was a little baby. You know, the experience of in e-commerce was still being thought about. What we have over the past subsequent couple decades is a monstrosity of digital marketing and e-commerce, right? But the two biggest companies on notice are Amazon and Google, because the front end digital ad space it front ends commerce. And the shit experience that Amazon has never grown from in 20-something years is very vulnerable. So Twitter just kind of collapsed and disintermediated all of the back end of the commerce by putting it right into the front of the pitch part of the digital marketing process. That to me is going to be the interesting thing to as it unfolds.
I think it's worth noting that Square has just expanded its St. Louis office, and it's right next to one of the NSA's new installations. And so I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how Square, adjusts to the fact that the federal government of the United States is not a big Bitcoin fan, and how they sort of scale all of that.
One of the fun things, if you look up where essentially flash memory is created in the world, and essentially who has which factories of interest, one of the only last remaining ones here in the United States of America is exactly 1/4 of a mile, it's half a mile, literally just down the street from the Utah data center. It's like, I'm not one to basically drop a thing about Micron and Utah data centers, but I wonder what their primary customer might be. They physically could literally just carry it over with like all their, physically with like all their burn bags or whatever, be like, hey, look, it's right here.
Well, it's super interesting how a lot of people who work on core technologies since the NSO hack scandal have been strongly encouraged to move to the Northern Virginia area, which is just kind of an interesting development.
Amazing. Tyler, by the way, we have any news on that one? On like timing or anything? We're gonna like pick a hoopla, or it's happening behind the scenes? Any news?
Sorry, I was multitasking.
On the NSO magic with things. Any news? Any word?
We are rescheduling. Faraz, who coordinated the conversation, had to reschedule, so we're going to reschedule.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, so there's a few steps on this one, but please keep us in the loop.
Yep. So,
hey, this is Gabby. I just wanted to point out, while we were talking, the product league of Twitter, Kayvon, just tweeted out the preview of the shop modules that people should start seeing on their Twitter profiles.
There it is. They're not going to go slowly into this one. That's big money. Next big headline is that a startup called Class, which is making a virtual classrooms that integrate exclusively with Zoom, raises $100 million, led by SoftBank at an 800 post-money valuation, so nearly a unicorn. And again, remote stuff is huge, everybody. Creators of Punk Spider say they're relaunching their search engine for hackable sites at DEF CON next week to spur web admins to fix thousands of unpatched bugs. AMD just did their Q2 revenue report, up 100% year over year, and some strong growth there, which is kind of obvious with the massive chip shortage. And then Brain Technologies raises $50 million and launches Natural, a natural language search engine app for iOS and US. And I said, did I not, in our last meeting 7 hours ago, that in the very near future, Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant are now going to become is a new platform as an interface for search, and that it will be they'll be listening all the time. And the point is that, for example, Google today has a huge advantage in this race of what you want. There's actually two different ways that you buy things and consume things, whether it be digital content or actual physical goods, which is there's passive and active. And this is very important to understand the difference. And passive, or let's start with active. Active is, you want something. You want to watch a video about X, you want to buy a product Y, and you're telling the computer, hey, Google, I want directions to this. I want to buy this. I want to watch this. You're feeding in. That's active. I know what I want right now. That's your intent. And Google takes in all of your intent. Other apps don't really take in much of your intent. And this gives Google a huge weapon. The other apps are more passive. And apps can be both. Most apps are. But in passive mode, you're just scrolling Instagram, and then you see a dress you didn't know you wanted, and now you do want to buy it, but you buy it right there. That's passive discovery. You do the same thing with YouTube videos. You're just scrolling YouTube, and that video looks interesting. Okay, passive consumption of video content. So there's active consumption and passive. They're kind of two different mind states. But because Google has an input box that you type things into, they're getting a lot of your active, desires through your implied, not even implied, very direct input of telling, your intent. The other apps, TikTok doesn't really get that from you generally, nor does Instagram, nor does Snapchat, nor does a lot of apps. So the point is that gives Google a huge advantage. They're getting all of your active in addition to your passive. Everyone else gets your passive.
Yeah, but Tyler,
yes,
in the case of YouTube, you do search on, I don't know, mystery, this, that, and some keywords,
yes.
right?
YouTube, you do more proportionally more active searches on YouTube than you probably do on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram. Fair enough. But here's the point. Is now that Alexa and Siri and Google Assistant are audio devices in your homes, and every app wants to get, now that we're going into e-commerce, they're going to be fighting to try and figure out what you want to buy before you know you want to buy it. And one way to do that is to have access to your microphone and listen to your conversations, which is why these companies are going to be fighting to put microphones into your home or get access to the microphone on your phone so that they can hear what you're talking about, and everything that you say, they're going to make a note. Oh, you said chocolate sundae. Oh, you said, dog leash. Oh, you said this. And they're going to start to build up a profile of all the products that you're talking about through the microphones, either in your phone, if they get access to that, which Apple won't let them, because Apple's going to keep that exclusive, that sweet, juicy, active, intent data. They're going to keep for themselves on their own device. And now you know why Google built a smartphone, because they saw this coming years ago. So Apple has it and Google has it. And again, Google has your active intent. So does Apple with your phone. And Apple's not going to share that with anybody, all the other apps. So, and by the way, Amazon learned this too. And that's why Amazon built Alexa and put that microphone into your house, because they didn't have a phone. So you've got Amazon with the microphone in your house, Google and Apple with microphones in your house and microphones in your pocket at all times. So they're now no longer sharing with everybody else. They're taking that sweet, juicy data ball and going home and keeping it to themselves. But these apps are going to try and create ways to find out your active intent, because it's going to become a race to show you the products that they know you want to buy. And so much so that when you are talking in your house, just hear this example out. There's all kinds of things they can infer from your audio through the microphone. For example, when you cough, there's now algorithms that can signify that cough is matched with a COVID cough signature, like a Shazam for coughs that exists. And so Siri can say, oh, Tyler, you have COVID. that could happen today, actually. And there's a lot of other things it could do. It can detect depression in your voice and then schedule a doctor's call for you. That's passive active intent. And it could do
wrong think. Wrong thinking if you're basically expressing ideas that might be unhappy, like I don't want to buy anything, or hey, I'm not sure if the party should actually be in charge. I mean, imagine being able to shut that down as quickly as you can ship something in the mail to people.
But I say all of this because the headline that I just read was Brain Technologies raises $50 million and launches Natural. That's the name of the product, Natural. It's a natural language search engine app for iOS. Now, it says voice-based and other personal assistant apps which use natural language and hefty AI engines in the back end to source information to address your various questions. Do your e-commerce bidding. Let me read this again. This is powerful. So, Brain Technologies raises $50 million for this natural search engine super app, they're calling it. And I'm tweeting this out right now so you can actually see a photo of it. And I'm curious if they're doing what I think they're doing. It says voice-based and other personal assistant apps which use natural language and hefty AI engines in the backend to source information to address your various questions, do your e-commerce bidding, or control one electronic device or another in your home have been around for years. But too often they have come up short when it comes to user experience, failing to nail the right solutions to your queries. Today, a new app is launching from a startup that has largely been in stealth mode up until now and tries to address this disparity, called Brain Technologies, is today announcing $50 million of funding along with what it releases. Along with that, it is releasing Natural, an iOS app in the US market. So this is an iOS app called Natural. Now pay attention to what Natural does. The $50 million, Jerry Yu, the young founder and CEO of Brain, a repeat entrepreneur and robotics enthusiast whose last company, a grocery delivery service in China, is still going strong, said in an interview that he does not like to call Natural a personal assistant app, not because of the shortcomings of so many of these in the past, but because of the voice association may have with the concept. We don't position ourselves as a voice assistant because we don't think the future is voice only, he said. I think it should be the right combination of voice and native app experience. Instead, he describes Natural as the world's first generative computer interface, the logical progression in digital information search. That progression, in his view, started with the web, progressed to search engines, and then to apps, before landing on what he sees it today. The Natural brings all of these together in some degree. Currently, you speak or type any kind of question or command into the app, which then provides a solution that might be in the form of links to other apps you might have. For example, I'd like sushi tonight will bring back options for ordering sushi and possibly your most favored dishes from a selection of restaurants by way of food ordering apps that you already use, or places to go eat it, as well as options for making that sushi yourself, etc., etc. This is essentially a search engine based on voice. Similarly, travel searches return search results that dip into multiple silos from, say, airlines and airline aggregators that are easily editable and that you can buy direct from those results if you already have payment details on your device. While Google provide, and by the way, no doubt they'll have all of your payment details in this app so that it says, oh, I found this, do you want to buy it? You just say yes to authenticate. While Google provides this to some degree, you eventually have to navigate to sites to buy the tickets, which might end up significantly more expensive than you actually visit the said site. The more you use the app, the theory is that it will learn more from what you want it will learn from your questions. AI that anticipates what we are trying to say or do is something that has been attempted before, of course, but the difference here, he says, is from Brain's approach, which is based on the concept of one-shot learning, which he describes as a kind of general purpose AI, a tool that learns to use other tools.
But the problem here is that they didn't take Lambda, Google Lambda, in the speech, because this is what Google Lambda want to do too.
Yes, Google does
exactly. This is a seasonal thing. It happens every few years when someone says, wait, voice interfaces are a thing. Wait, that uses natural language processing. What can you do with that? And they say, oh, you can express intent. Wait, you have to infer that? Wait, if we can infer intent, we could infer shopping things. This happens literally about every 2 or 3 years. There's a new crop of them. And it's comical to see how far they get each time with things. So it gets a little bit farther each time, and then the markets and get shut down, and they try again, and this is the latest crop.
But there's
And also,
my point is there's a battle for your microphone now that we didn't anticipate before.
Totally.
And whoever gets the microphone is going to be able to direct you and monetize your intent.
Could I just take it 15 seconds of stuff? Imagine a world where all of our needs are met, and shopping is not the primary mode of human existence. Imagine if you used all these aggressive technologies to inject, like buy. Imagine if you did some of those early ideas that got some of us into tech with like education stuff. You want to learn about something. I want to become a rocket scientist one day. All right, well, you need to learn these things. Hey, look, there's a learning opportunity here. Magical, happy, build people up stuff. We're going to get to a point here where essentially we end up having houses full of shit that no one actually wants. But at the same time, we at
also
least
known as the American economy.
Well, no, what used to be the American economy. That went away a long time ago. It doesn't exist in new generations.
This sounds deeply seditious, what you're saying. But go on.
Okay.
Or you become like Elon Musk, and then you just sold all your house, and then you just go down.
Go live in a rocket farm.
So Duolingo just did their IPO, raising $521 million. China orders Tencent and 13 other developers to rectify problems with harassing pop-ups in their apps. And what else is hot in these big headlines right now? Berlin-based consumer electronics rental service Grover raises $1 billion in asset-backed financing. So to answer your Charles question, you're going to be renting products in the future and a lot less buying. As these rental companies are going to start exploding because they're going to be able to deliver them to you in 10 minutes. And why buy them when you can rent them and have them delivered in 10 minutes? And, you need to use a stapler. Why buy the stapler? Rent it, it'll be in your house in 10 minutes and you can use it and then send it back. And, so that could be a very interesting case when you have fully autonomous delivery networks, all over your city delivering things, in 10 minutes at practically no cost at all, no delivery charges. And everyone could just start renting everything from each other. There's no point in all of us owning a basketball when we're only using it, limited time. We can do time, So anyway, I think that is going to become an interesting development. And people have been dabbling. I had that first idea 15 years ago, way too early. I didn't execute it because I knew it was too early. But now that this autonomous delivery networks are coming into place and the delivery times are getting super, super low, the rental of things becomes more and more interesting. So anyway, what else? That's pretty much, let me just look really fast. If somebody could share a headline so I can just look through this, the popular news items that are being shared. TikTok expands their live platform with new features, including events, co-hosts, Q&As, moderation tools, and more to make it more competitive with Instagram Live. As you know, hallelujah, I told you this was coming. TikTok and Instagram have to go into live streaming because that's where all that sweet social commerce money is. It's not in photos, it's in live streaming. And so all of the social apps are going to race into live streaming with real-time feedback from the buyer so that the buyer can ask questions from the host about the product in real time. And that is so much profoundly better shopping experience than Amazon, because now you can ask the person holding the product in their goddamn lap, how much does it weigh? Turn it around. Let me see the front. What does it smell like? Please lick the thing for me. What does it taste like? You can't do that on Amazon. You can do this in live streaming video e-commerce. So that's the fundamental difference in all of this. And it's going to be wild. You're going to see. We're already doing it here in Thailand on a daily basis. It's phenomenal. But anyway, so TikTok's expanding their live platform to catch up with Instagram Live. Hold on to your pocketbook. It's coming fast and furious. Valora, a mobile...
One thing I wanted to add very quickly is if you think about this, actually all those e-commerce platforms should push for or encourage more remote work, because if you work remotely, you open up a lot more time in your daily calendar to watch live streams as you work.
Sure.
So that's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be, talking about going back to the office.
Yep. And there's Orem, whose AI-powered tech helps sales reps automate outbound calls, raises 25 from David at Craft Ventures. David Sachs is an absolute mastermind at building SaaS companies. And if you're lucky enough to get him as an investor, It's as close as you can get to raising a unicorn at the A stage. Harvard biostatistician is reconsidering plans to use Apple Watch as part of a study after finding inconsistencies with the heart rate variability data collected. Droom, an online marketplace for used cars and motorbikes in India, raises $200 million pre-IPO at a $1.2 billion valuation. And
those rickshaws, man.
It'll turn into car rental platforms in the near future. In fact, we had one earlier today that raised a bunch of money. And then Invia Robotics, which offers robotics as a service for warehouse automation, raises $30 million from Qualcomm. And a look at the role of social media manager, which has evolved from a position commonly filled by millennial interns into more professional discipline. Indian business messaging service called Gupshup raises an additional $240 million from Tiger Global and Fidelity. Berlin, we covered Grovo, did we not? The electronics rental service Grovo just raised $1 billion. And when startups raise $1 billion, that's when you know all the other investors are paying attention. And that's a hot new area, just like the 10-minute delivery, grocery shopping, and all of that. And now electronics rental service. That pay attention. That's going to get hot. The whole rental market is now going to explode now that we've got these autonomous vehicles doing 10-minute deliveries everywhere in the city. You can why buy it when you can rent it? Treeverse, which develops an open source Git-like service for data lakes, raises $23 million. Brazil-based Pipo Suade, which sells and manages healthcare benefits for other companies, raises $20 million. And we mentioned critics say Facebook has compromised on its community standards to access commercial opportunities in the Asia Pacific region, home to 1.25. This is from Nikkei Asia. Let's read this one. But while I open it, let's one more headline from Nikkei Asia says TSMC receives final approval for a 2-nanometer chip plant in Taiwan. Sources say construction will begin in 2022 and equipment will be installed in 2023. TSMC going into
marketing.
Yeah. So Nikkei says the big story as the world's largest social media platform looks to the prodigious numbers in Asia to combat its decline in the West, it finds itself walking a tightrope. The big story, losing face. The perils of Facebook's Asia strategy compromises with regional governments' speed access to growth markets, where it says in October 2019, a t-shirt clad Mark Zuckerberg stood in front of an audience in Georgetown University and sounded a solemn warning. But it's Nikkei Asia paywalled this article, unfortunately. So I'm going to tweet it out nonetheless. And now that's the big stories from that are being shared online. We covered literally all of them. Let me.
Hey Tyler, I'm
Yes?
surprised you didn't mention the Robinhood, because you always did. There's a new article in the Wall Street Journal that I tweeted out a while ago to Tech News that many individual investors, though being given access to the IPO, are going to pass on it. And a piece of information in there, but I didn't know
Which
that apparently Robinhood, the brokerage firm.
Yeah.
Okay. And that apparently they made like $30 million from trading in Dogecoin, Dogecoin, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And so some people are concerned about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And then there's a new popular article being shared right now, which is from Reuters that says, after Twitter's refusal to block content related to the farmers' protests, which clearly the government was asking Twitter. Now, we didn't know that, but now we do. India was...
Yeah, they got like the January 6th stuff with things just like, well, that's our own version with things. Anyone that basically has a thing. Any government worldwide that has domestic insurrection or any domestic discontent or just dissent or just saying, I don't like the color of our politicians' hair, suddenly is now up for censorship.
So check this out. The headline right now from Reuters, I'm going to tweet this out, you'll see it with your own eyes, is, in spats with Twitter, India's government begins messaging shift to rival coup, KOO. And if you've joined us anytime in the past few months, you know we've talked about the incredible, crazy drama that has led to that. And it was obvious that that was happening. And now it's official. It says Twitter is fast losing its sheen as a favored communication tool for many Indian government departments and ministers, keen to promote homegrown rival coup, while the U.S. firm comes under fire for non-compliance with India's laws. Oh, who would have seen that coming? Hallelujah. I need the hallelujah button because we've been saying that this was going to happen for
Sing hallelujah!
many weeks. Praise the Lord. Amen. Hallelujah. Cal, Cheryl, how many times did I say that the government's going to be pushing the native local coup because they don't like Twitter and they want to try and push Twitter out? And maybe 60 times? Maybe 60.
That's pretty common sense too, by the way.
No.
But
Well,
this is going to be
maybe
like a
not
repeat
because
of,
Reuters feels like it needs to be a headline right now.
This is like a repeat of what happened in China, right? They managed to build up these huge companies by preventing Google and Twitter and all that from operating in China.
But this, back to Charles's point, we have to take a moment and respect China for saying, oh, you want to send your apps in here? Hell nah. Thank you very much. We've got our own apps. Thank you very much. Other countries are not so clear in what they really want. India clearly doesn't want Twitter, very clearly. But India can't bring itself to say, you know what? We don't want Twitter. Like Nigeria did, by the way. Nigeria said, hey, Twitter, now you can get out. You're done. We're stopping you. India would love to do the same. But they can't. Why not? Please answer that for me.
I think it's a wanting to have the cake and eat it too. They do want the foreign investments, and they might be worried that if they do a blanket thing like that, foreign investments might dry up.
But they kicked out 200 Chinese apps. Why not kick out one American app?
Well, because China.
Because the US is happy that happened, right? So in a sense, that's understandable with all this world being partitioned or whatever, right?
Yeah, I remember
with a lot of the money coming more from the West than from China.
I guess, yeah, they just don't mind China boycotting them anyway.
Okay.
You saw Secretary Blinken, went over there and said that we have a very strong alliance. And if you remember those 200 companies, Trump ultimately banned TikTok because the Indians had banned a number of Chinese products ahead of time. And he tried to cut some sort of weird deal with TikTok being acquired by Oracle, which were his political allies, here in the U.S. So I think you're quite right, though, that one of the issues is that people don't want to be explicit about these sorts of things. But I think that they'll increasingly become more and more explicit as their domestic industries are built up. And let's not forget that Twitter has a lot of Indian engineers who work there.
Yep.
Vijaya Gadde, who's sort of like the right-hand woman, the Gal Friday of Jack Dorsey there, was herself born in India.
Yep.
So there's a lot of you don't necessarily want to give up the influence operation that you might have on other countries, which Twitter could well be.
Yeah.
Okay, just throwing this out there with things. Look, there's consumer mindshare and dopamine going off in your brain when you hit a button type kind of thing, and sure, there's a lot of authentication aspects. But literally, if you have the ability to just know who's who, we're already rolling these government IDs, we already have China's rolling its national data things. Actually creating a Twitter clone from scratch, it's not that fucking hard from a technical difficulty level. This is purely market adoption. It's purely just the fact that everyone's using it because everyone else is using it thing. If you have some political event suddenly shift that opinion, I predict that you're going to basically see it's not that hard to replace these platforms. And a lot of the trumpeting about saying we've got the AI algorithm to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, great, that's great for selling people stuff, but it's not that hard to actually make the technical underlying infrastructure.
I think it's a good thing for India because India can get richer through this.
Okay, next point I wanted to make was, well, Delhi High Court says statement by Twitter clearly shows total non-compliance with IT rules, which include appointing a liaison, giving it a week to comply. But after Twitter's refusal to block content related to farmer protests, some Indian government ministers and departments are shifting to homegrown rival coup. Reuters, where have you been? We've been talking about that for 3 months. We came to that conclusion 3 months ago.
Reuters is American deep state. So deep state it's starting to pay attention.
So just one other quick thing. Another court, and I tweeted this as well, threw out a case against the Twitter CEO by one of the state governments that wanted him to appear and potentially arrest him. So the Karnataka High Court threw out that case saying that's arm twisting and harassment of the Twitter officials. So courts kind of rule on both directions.
Hey, Vinay, to be precise, that was the CEO of Twitter India.
That's
and
right.
The state was, I think, Uttar Pradesh. Yeah, that happened a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Yeah, Uttar Pradesh wanted him to appear in court,
Right.
and Karnataka, and he based out of Bangalore, and Karnataka government threw it out.
Right. Well,
And then
Karnataka High Court threw it out.
Okay. So, Snap says Snap Map will now include recommendations for places to visit based on location, friend activity, and previous favorites. And Apple has sent a cease and desist letter to at least one Chinese citizen who had advertised stolen prototypes of old iPhone models on social media. And a look at VTubers, a virtual anime-like avatar YouTube channel driven by anonymous Japanese users with virtual anime-like avatars.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, right. Driven by anonymous Japanese users that are now mainstream, surpassing 1.5 billion views per month. Let's dig into that one, shall we? So it says, and I'm tweeting this out right now to the Tech News Twitter account so you can save it and retweet it and like it and lick it and smell it. And what it says is a virtual YouTuber named Kizuna Ai is the featured guest on Downtown DX, a decades-old primetime variety show hosted by two of Japan's most famous veteran comedians, Hitoshi Matsumoto and Masatoshi Hamada, both pushing 60 years old. And the boomers joke about not knowing who or what she is, feigning ignorance. What is this, they ask, peering at the kinetic anime graphic, its eyelashes fluttering. Who's in there? But the AI gets the last laugh. Do you even know about us? Matsumoto asks her, or the screen on the floor of the soundstage, where she is manifesting today. And then says, of course I do know who you are. And then I replies in her squeaky chirp, whatever. I hate tech articles that are written in narratives like this, like a book. But anyways, the headline, I think, covers most of it, that this is a wildly popular virtual influencer, which is one of the topics we're very fascinated about, because with social commerce and social shopping exploding, the question is, who's going to be selling you the stuff in these live streams? And it's very possible in the age of deep fakes that you yourself will be selling you the stuff that you want to buy in the future. It'll be a deep fake of yourself wrapped around an avatar with your own voice selling you the stuff. And or it could be virtual influencers who have huge fan bases, who are optimized in the art of selling better than any human can do. Just like humans can beat the world's best chess players, why not make a digital avatar that can outsell the world's best salesperson?
In fact, going along further, Tyler, if they have your measurements, they might even dress you up in the clothing that they are trying to make you buy.
Hey, Tyler, look at this jacket. Look how it looks on you right now. I love it. And then it's just truly amazing to think that's happening in the next year or two. And this virtual influencer thing is, the difference is human influencers like Madonna and the Beatles and Elvis and Taylor Swift today, or Justin Bieber or Kanye or whatever, have a determined shelf life of about, in the best cases, a decade or maybe two if they're really fortunate. A virtual assistant will never expire. It can constantly optimize exponentially forever, and that's really a wild proposition
For people that are really interested in this, there's an older community for Hatsune Miku in Japan. They're kind of ahead of us on the cultural adoption factor on this. But one thing that's really interesting about this, so they have them for the Vocaloid community, where they essentially have the dancing anime character. What's interesting is it's become almost like a tech demo form factor, where whenever you have an avatar driving technology or something that involves music or virtual dances or anything that involves like physical motion, it becomes kind of the thing that you basically want to say, oh, well, what's your version of your demo on the Hatsune Miku thing? So whenever they do a real life concert with a virtual character dancing there on the screen on a hologram, they're actually showing off a lot of very advanced technologies along the way, and they have a bunch of people cheer and do for it. What's really neat about it is the number of people that have contributed to the tech basis for this. One of the reasons why this ties back into the avatars for essentially the virtual influencers is that we're going to essentially see these as basically not just going to be like the artificial people, but they're going to start filling social functions that normally we have to have people exerting physical or intellectual labor for it, we're going to start having virtual constructs do the same thing, but interface with us as if they're basically virtual people, which is going to be really cool. One last point, the compression of this. It's less of it's a nuanced point with things, but essentially if you're communicating with avatars, it is basically requires less physical data to transport over the networks, and it also is something that you can combine more technologies on an easier basis than if you're working with photorealistic video. That said, we're now in an era where some of the newer deepfake stuff can actually do some of that. It just requires more computation time with stuff. So there's some interesting dynamics on there. You're going to see the economics start to influence in this, not just technology.
And what Chris is saying is actually what I do with Leah with the video. It's AI versus CGI, and then you have like less compression rate and it's more faster to produce video with the AI algorithms instead of using CGI.
So,
yeah, and I just want to add, Chris, to your point, what's going to accelerate this is not the rise of the influencers, but the fall of the influencers. Tyler read out an article a couple of minutes ago about influencer management companies. Those are increasing. There's tons of these companies, and many of them are finding influencers. One wrong word, one wrong tweet, all of that brand equity they've built can go away. Once more of those fails start happening, the rise of virtual influencers is going to happen. More money will flow into it for sure.
Yeah, Vinay, you're right. But the things too that adds to this is that when you're able to speak with the virtual avatar, like 50,000 speaking at the same time with the virtual avatar, 24 hours 7, this availability that the virtual avatar have compared to what's the real life influencer have, it's huge difference, and then it will increase the intelligence of those systems will be more and more and more in the future. Thanks.
I was
absolutely agree with you, John Francis.
One of the movies that came out recently was called Her. This is like 3 or 4 years ago with things, but it's a great movie. One of the things I thought was absolutely beautiful about it is one of the first movies that I saw that would hit critically acclaimed type kind of thing. But what is interesting about it, aside from having Scarlett Johansson, which is fun just in general, but what's fun about it is that they showed a virtual character that had more emotional intelligence than the rest of the cast. And what I thought was really interesting about this is that it's kind of a cultural shift in how we're basically viewing the cultural role of artificial intelligences, because in the 80s and 90s it was like Terminator, kill us all. At least the mechanical machines will do everything, but at least humans have creativity and emotions, and they'll never be able to capture that in the algorithms or stuff. And the robots will never be able to do that. What's interesting about this newer type of role is this idea of actually machines that have a higher degree of emotional intelligence or creativity, or things that we typically attribute to being exclusively human domains, and we're able to actually co-create with them. And I think it's a really, really beautiful and interesting things in that direction. Of course, it'll probably be used to hell and used for spear phising and all those other things. Yes, there'll be some horrifying things in there. But there's beautiful parts too. So anyways, cool things in that direction.
I was going to say that these virtual ones might be even more acceptable to people who are shy or introverted or whatever, that they don't so much enjoy interacting with real humans. They might find this more comforting.
This is totally what's happening. I mean, a lot of people are in this position.
Tyler, I feel so sorry for the real influencer. You have been hyping things up for them. This is their chance of making big money, and before they even started, it sounds like it's going to end soon.
So let's run now through the fantastic tweets that people have been tweeting for the past several hours, or at least I've got a whole bunch of tweets here. Are you ready? We're going to blast through these, and we're going to tweet all of them simultaneously to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And are we ready? Okay. Where's my air horn? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Boom. 1, 2, 3. From the top. Here we do. Coca-Cola launches NFTs. Who gives a shit? I'm now getting bored of these stupid announcements. Every marketing team on the planet is launching an NFT. However, Ashton Kutcher did do something truly remarkably genius with NFTs in the past 24 hours, which is kind of clearly inspired by the CryptoPunks. He's making these stoner cats, which are 13,000 little digital cats, but he's making an animated series of a cartoon called Stoner Cats with other celebrity friends doing the voices. The 13,000 Stoner Cats sold out very quickly at about 3.5 ETH each, which is about Each ETH is worth about $2,300. And if you do the math, that works out to $100 million that he made.
This is brilliant. Every single B-list, C-list, A-list, every Hollywood actor, every worldwide actor could have their own one, and the value of them is a random market thing. Oh man, they could promote the hell out of this.
Yeah. So for Ashton Kutcher to do this without needing to go to a movie studio or as you normally would need to do to work with some kind of Hollywood studio to produce a big animated series like South Park called Stoner Cats, he just raised $100 million from fans who now have a piece of the game in the form of these NFTs, and that is the most interesting use case of NFTs that I've seen yet to date. And this Coca-Cola NFT thing is probably the least inspired version of using an NFT, and it's getting really mundane and boring with every marketing department on the planet feels they need to launch an NFT, and they need to stop doing that and stop doing the PR announcements. Anyway, so Ben, I think you want to mention that the Clean Tech room is now open.
Yeah, he's already opened it.
Okay.
He's there if anybody wants to go there.
Okay, I think he's on the stage here too. So we're going to run through these headlines real fast, and then we're going to run over to the Clean Tech room. So we've got, I'm not kidding, 30 headlines in, not 30 minutes, 15 minutes? No, 5 minutes. Let's do 5 minutes. Here we go.
Yeah,
so,
we were late scheduling it, Tyler, but it's cool. We'll be over there and we'll hang out and wait for you guys. It's all cool. Good luck with the headlines.
Give us 5-10 minutes. So the next one up is that from Dr. Fran about You Will Build Worlds, Facebook and the Metaverse and building bridges. And indeed, part of the beauty of the Metaverse is something a lot of people don't know other than JT on stage, which is you can create it yourself because the tools are getting so good that the user and the creator become one and the same. So in video games, it used to be, it's hard to make video games. And now the tools are getting such in the metaverse that you can create your Roblox-like space or Minecraft-like world or, create this world as you yourself. And then, of course, you can work together in teams and huge, massive teams of, thousands of people building virtual worlds together. And you can monetize those virtual worlds that you create. So the user and the creator are merging. It's no longer creators making worlds for consumers like in video games or in movies. We're now going to create environments of worlds and experiences collaboratively together in the VR world. And that's what the article's about, called You Will Build Worlds, because the tools in VR are enabling that. And it's quite a truly fundamental difference between the PC era where people made apps that you consumed or media that you consumed, and same on the smartphone era where people made apps and websites and media that you consumed. Now you have the tools to make the content that others consume, and everyone can together, and everyone's a creator and everyone's a consumer, and it's a big mess and it'll be wild. And there you go. So the next article is that Kaseya, who was the company that got hacked by the ransomware, that was the 1,500 companies in the supermarkets in Sweden, all that. It was unclear. They got it figured out, and they got everything back online, and it wasn't clear if they'd paid the ransom or not to the hackers. And now they're saying they deny the ransomware payment, and yet have 100% effective decryption tool. So kudos to Kaseya for getting out of that without paying the fine for the ransom. Flipkart, which is the big e-commerce thing in India owned by Amazon, sees double-digit growth on their new pay later transactions because they just started doing buy now, pay later, like Klarna, like everyone on the planet's doing. It's another one of those mega super trends of buy now, pay later, which Apple itself just announced in the past 4 or 5 days. And now,
hey Tyler, just a quick correction. Flipkart's not owned by Amazon; they're owned by Walmart.
Thank you.
Walmart.
You're right. So the product has seen a 70% adoption rate amongst consumers at checkout, and plans to cross the 100 million transactions buy now, pay later. So it's already proving wildly beneficial to Flipkart, as it will to any e-commerce site, and that's why they're all going to add it. So every e-commerce transaction will have the buy now, pay later option because it just works for everybody involved. And then, Evan, you just sent in this one about quantum internet. The race is on to build an unhackable online world. Great leaps are already being made in creating a super secure quantum internet. It could overturn the role of information in our lives. And I'm tweeting that one out. So you can read all about that from newscientist.com. And Evan also sent in this crazy cool one, as he's known for doing, that the German pharmaceutical group behind one of the most successful COVID vaccines called BioNTech, that's the Pfizer vaccine essentially, wants to use the same technology of mRNA vaccines to develop an effective malaria vaccine, because now we can do it, everybody. We got mRNAs. We can make vaccines for pretty much everything. Where's the air horn? Boom, boom. There we go. We're going to cure all diseases with our new genetic engineering prowess. We did it, everybody.
You only need to lose 4 million for this first one. It's dark, but at least we'll get something out of it.
According to findings from Statista, 79% of Americans who paid for digital video content over this gives us a chance to play a very fun game called Tech News Jeopardy. It's real simple to play. Here's the question. According to findings from Statista, 79% of Americans pay for video content over the past 12 months. Subscribe to which of the following? There's Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, Disney, HBO Max, YouTube Premium, and Apple TV. Who has the highest percentage of market share in America? Netflix? YouTube. Okay.
Netflix.
YouTube is wrong. That's 26%. They're in second to last place. Apple's in last place with 20%. Anyone else care to guess?
Disney? Not Netflix.
Netflix.
Flash your mics if you think it's Netflix. Those are the smart people right there flashing their mics. It's Netflix with 79% of market share is Netflix, followed by 69% with Amazon Prime Video, which I think people are kind of sleeping on how powerful Amazon Prime Video is because it's free. It's included in your Amazon Prime subscription, by the way. And then you've got Hulu at 55%, Disney Plus picking up crazy pace at 52% because they're quite new still.
Holy hell!
I know, right? Their content.
Return of the Jedi. 12 months ago. That's insane.
It's insane, but that's how good their content is because they own
so they're
Marvel.
4 months from now, essentially Disney Plus.
If you have kids, you have to buy it, or your children will literally disown you and kill you in your sleep. So they have a really interesting business model.
One of them tried they'll sing the Frozen songs, "Let It Go" over and over again until it
let it
go. It's all about Bluey.
Yes. HBO Max at 33%, YouTube Premium only at 26%, second to last as Apple TV with an embarrassing 20%. So that's thank you for playing.
Hollywood will have gatekeepers now.
Iranian hackers pose as aerobics instructors to break into UK defense company. In an astonishing real-life espionage plot, a hacker thought to have ties to the Iran's Revolutionary Guard posed as a Liverpool woman while flirting with the UK defense company as an aerobics instructor.
They finally found their weakness. James
we
Bond,
need footage.
Was she singing "Let's Get Physical"?
Yeah, I bet she was with a Persian accent. Who could resist? So Snapchat's latest augmented reality lens turns celebrities into lip-syncing pop stars. Here we go with the deepfakes, everybody. And as predicted, you're going to have personalized, optimized content so that any celebrity could be selling you the product. And they're going to optimize the best celebrity to sell you the product that they want to sell you because they know you're a Tom Cruise fan. So they use Tom Cruise as the salesperson rather than Taylor Swift because you hate Taylor Swift. So they're not going to use Taylor Swift. They're going to look at your data, that sweet, juicy data, and be able to figure out the perfect person to sell you these e-commerce products through deepfakes. So AR snapshots, they call them. Snapchat's latest.
Those lip syncs are more challenging to do than people realize with stuff because one of the things is that you need a 3D reconstruction of the model of the face in real time. That's one thing. 2, you need to actually make new stuff on top of that because you typically can't see the mouth, so you have to artificially create a synthetic mouth inside that basically is that. So that's another challenge. Syncing up with the audio is one thing. Okay, that's another one. And then you need to basically make it hit the inflection points. That's a surprising number of technical challenges, and then making it work in the wild across, a million different things with uncontrollable lighting. Like, there's a lot of... It's technically impressive being able to pull that off in real time.
Okay. So, yeah, it says the Lens Studio community, now made up of more than 200,000 creators, has generated some impressive augmented reality effects in the last few years. And again, this speaks to the users are becoming the creators. And that trend is just going to continue and continue and continue as the tools get easier and easier and easier to make content, as AIs help you make the content like music and art and video and whatnot. So Snapchat's latest augmented reality lens turns celebrities into lip syncing pop stars, and they're singing all your favorite songs. Your favorite celebrity singing your favorite song. That's what's going on. So next up is China's tech giants, namely Tencent, is snapping up gaming studios around the world after decades of the US and Japan dominating the video game space. China's influence is growing as its tech giants snap up gaming studios around the world. And will they have the same influence that they have on Hollywood, where they don't allow anyone to talk about some island called Taiwan? I've never heard of it. And there's certainly, whatever that country is, people call it Taiwan.
I think you mean Taipei.
Taipei. China Taipei, but they don't have a flag. That's what and they don't have a currency or a president.
It's the weirdest thing.
None of those things. Yeah. So and they're not in the Olympics, but anyway, so China's buying up video game studios, and that will be very interesting. What those video games, what kind of directions they'll have to take with their new Chinese owners. Just ask anyone in Hollywood.
They make sure that you can't play past 7 p.m. at night on the school.
Exactly. Great point, Chris. In mainland China, gamers are no longer allowed to play past 10 p.m. Because the game will shut off. It recognizes your face, and you're registered with the state. The app knows that you are under 18 years old, and your app goes to sleep because you shouldn't be playing video games past 10 p.m. That's actually happening. So
if you're loyal to the party, though, your social credit score might increase just enough where you get a few more.
Or if I tell on you, Chris, that you're using a VPN, I might get a little boost in my social credit score. Boom.
I mean, I've got Japanese manga stuff with things. I don't know, that might put me into some bad things. I watch some K-pop videos. It's like I hope I'm down for organ harvesting now. It's dark.
Tata will launch, which is India's one mega conglomerate that does one of the leading car companies globally is Tata, actually, out of India, and Tata will launch a satellite internet in India. Oh boy, watch out, Elon. Airtel in satellite internet for space. So Tata Group is entering the satellite internet race in India's partnership with Telesat. With the partnership, it will give tough competition to other major players in the space like Elon Musk's Starlink, Amazon's Project Cooper, and Sunil Bharti Mittal's OneWeb, and China has their own one that they say is going to be up in the next year or two. So now we got
one thing a lot of people don't know is when you look at who owns the satellites in space. Actually, one of the main pioneers in some of the privately owned stuff was actually Walmart, of all things. A lot of people don't realize this, but Walmart actually has its own miniature little satellite fleet. It's not a big one, but it's ancient actually. But they actually use it for fleet management. Tata essentially putting that as like following in kind of a tradition there. Essentially, there's probably going to be some crazy cool stuff with ride sharing or something. Not ride sharing, but like some sort of like fleet management options in the near future, because they got all that vehicle stuff, all those engineers, and all that conglomerate with all the different divisions. It's going to be some cool stuff there.
So Nigeria,
hey, Tyler,
yes,
is Tata and Airtel being used synonymously? I didn't realize Airtel has any connection to the Tata Group.
And they're partnering for the satellites.
Oh, I see. Okay. I began to get the impression, the way you read it, that Airtel was being thought of as being part of the Tata Group. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Nigeria to launch a digital currency called an e-Naira in October, says the central bank. Nigeria plans to launch its own cryptocurrency in October, its central bank governor said on Tuesday. Bada boom, bada bing.
The original ICO with the Nigerian princes that would offer you this over.
We need to transfer you a whole lot of our digital currency. Nigeria barred its banks and financial institutions from dealing in or facilitating transactions in cryptocurrencies in February, and now it plans to launch its own. And that's how you know a country's about to do their own digital currency, when they start banning all the competitors.
France have also tested their wholesale CBDC with Tunisia.
Okay. Business messaging platform Gupshup raises $240 million. We covered that one already. Thank you, Ranjit. And to broaden our breadth of news consumption, we should always listen to both sides of the story. The guidance here is to forget CBDC. Oh, so CBDC, central bank digital currencies, concocted in hell by Satan himself, says the ASI president Rich Chekan. During an interview, Rich Chekan also stated that Bitcoin hasn't been tested enough as a currency to pose a threat to the US dollar yet, and that, quote unquote, central bank digital currencies are concocted in hell by Satan himself. And so the guidance here is to forget CBDCs, and make gold 10% of our portfolio to avoid siding with Satan. Okay, next. Thank you for that, Aaron. And then the next one is that the Joint Chiefs seek a new war fighting paradigm after a devastating loss in a war game simulation over Taiwan. So
red team versus blue team, they can't figure out how to get blue team on the win.
Yeah, the Joint Chiefs seek a new war fighting paradigm after devastating loss in a classified war games. U.S. forces failed miserably in the war games, which simulated a battle for Taiwan, among other scenarios. And study suggests that things may go downhill in middle age. Researchers started tracking 17,000 participants as far back as 1970, finds out about 1 in 3 people aged 46 or over has a multiple chronic health issues. That's the headline from BBC News. About 1 in 3 has problems such as high blood pressure and mental ill health. A study suggests chronic health issues for 33% of people over the age 46. CDC reinstitutes mask recommendations for some vaccinated people as Delta is dangerous. And that's all you need to know. You need to wear a mask even if you're vaccinated, because Delta is sneaky like that.
Of course.
Instagram Reels can now be twice as long. And Reels is now nearly a year old. So it seems it's time for an update yet again. But it's, indeed, TikTok and everybody, they're lengthening the length of the content. And now you know why, because they're going to be selling you shit in their videos and photos and live streams. We're all shopping more online as consumer behavior shifts, is the headline from World Economic Forum. The pandemic has changed global consumer behavior forever. Consumer shift to digital channels will remain after the pandemic, says a PwC report now sent out by the World Economic Forum. And you can see the change in this behavior in a very beautiful graphs where it says consumer loyalty has plummeted, with buyers switching brands at unprecedented rates. The use of smartphone for online shopping has more than doubled since 2018. And the chart below illustrates answers and shows a shift to digital and growing trend for shopping using connected devices such as smartphones, tablets, and smart voice assistants such as Amazon Echo, Google Home, Samsung SmartThings, and whatnot. So the question is, how are people buying today? And these add up to more than 100%. But what percentage of people shop in stores now? The answer is 46%. Well done. You got that right. What percentage of people buy things online via a PC or a tablet or a mobile phone or via a smart home device? The answer is about 40% for all of them. So slightly more for the voice, 34% on a PC, 38% on a tablet, 44% on a smartphone, and 42% via a voice assistant. Is from PwC. And then next up, we've got Dell won't ship energy-hungry PCs to California and 5 other U.S. states due to power restrict regulations in those states. So no power-hungry PCs for you because your state no longer has enough power for this computer. Good times. Bots are creating problems for Americans needing new passports, because the State Department has stopped using their online booking system because third-party bots are making last-minute appointments and selling them to travelers, creating a black market for appointments to get your passports updated.
We have ticket scalpers for passport appointments? Seriously?
Bots. Ticket scalping bots.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. I mean,
yeah.
Basically,
get your civic appointments now, essentially. Get your meetings today.
Well, when Ticketmaster went, with no concerts, all those bots that were buying all the tickets for Ticketmaster needed to go somewhere.
You're right. That's a whole new market.
Nearly 3/4 of the population of Sierra Leone struggle to get access to electricity, but a device that harnesses the power of vibrations is bringing light to communities in energy poverty. From the BBC, I just retweeted it.
Just get them some freaking solar panels. It's
how
not that hard to make.
How pedestrians are lighting homes in Sierra Leone. A device that harnesses the power of vibrations through pedestrians somehow is lighting their homes. I just tweeted it out. And Ecuador revokes citizenship of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, according to CNN. And the Ecuadorian court on Monday ruled in favor of revoking the citizenship of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. And if you want to skip the vaccine in Russia, you could be suspended from work. When Russia's vaccine campaign stumbled from the state trying to force people to get the vaccine, the authorities dumped the responsibility on companies. And now the companies are telling you are no longer employed because that's where they hit you in your wallet, which the state cannot really do, but the companies can. And the state controls the companies, and the companies control your wallet. So the state, by proxy, is controlling you through your wallet, through the companies, to get you vaccinated. And if you don't want to be vaccinated, you don't have a job. Very clever. So virtual reality is the rich white kid of technology, according to Wired. For decades, VR has failed to live up to expectations, yet somehow it keeps receiving more chances and more resources because it's a spoiled, rich, privileged, suburban, waspy.
Someone sounds some bitter here.
Yeah. Well, that's
Don't
Wired.
forget to add from SoCal.
And Monero and Dash
Zuckerberg.
at the center of a missing persons case in Norway. In the midst of a missing person case, Norwegian law enforcement is trying to break open anonymous cryptocurrencies, Monero and Dash, probably because the missing person has a wallet, and if they can get into the wallet, I'm guessing, but
they're rich.
Yeah. You can read that article. I just tweeted it out. Norwegian police are trying to crack privacy coins. Monero and Dash is part of a missing person case. The privacy coins were reportedly used in connection with a ransom attempt in the kidnapping of Anne Elizabeth Hagen. Norway's National Cybersecurity Center is trying to pry open two cryptocurrencies known for their privacy protection capabilities amidst the search for a missing person. Police believe that the privacy coins were used in connection with a ransom attempt and that tracing these transactions could help lead to Hagen's whereabouts. Wow. Let's hope they figure it out. And then high-profile entrepreneurs launch an $85 million fund to back Indian SaaS startups, as the 4 high-profile Indian entrepreneurs are former unicorn founders themselves, and they're creating a operator-led VC firm for India, as now that the early Indian unicorn founders are starting their own VC fund to invest in the future next generation of Indian unicorns, and the golden cycle has been created in India. Well done, everybody. You figured it out. That is the true essence of Silicon Valley right there. And we have, my God, in the time it took me to read those, another 500 tweets came in. So we're going to have to save those for next time now that we're at the top of the hour. Thank you very much. We're now going to go over to...
share one from Monica.
Monica, you want to share something?
No, Monica is not here, but I'll share on his behalf.
Go.
Apparently, 2/3 of Indian population, 1.3 billion people, already have the COVID antibodies, meaning to say that, the Delta variant actually swept through India and already,
herd immunity. They did it. Well done, everybody. We did it. Okay. Well, we will meet again tomorrow. Click on the title to join the club and get notifications and look at the schedule. And we're now going to go over to the Clean Tech Room, which is now in progress.
Up and running.
Yes.
Up and running.
So we will see you over there.
See you there. Bye.
Clean Tech Room, and we'll hope